evening, everyone. We're at the regular business meeting of the District of Squamish for March 20th. Health and Squallow and Peace Collectment, plus Squamish, Whale Mail. Welcome to the traditional territory of the Squamish Nation. There's an agenda in front of council. Looking for a motion to adopt the agenda. Moved by Councillor Kent, seconded by Councillor Chappelle. All those in favor? Opposed, if any, motion carries. Are there any notices of motion? Seeing none. We have two proclamation requests. First up, we have our sustainability coordinator talking about Kitchen Week.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. So I'm here to ask the District of Squamish to proclaim April 22nd to April 29, 2018 as Pitching Week in Squamish. So this proclamation allowed the district to take advantage of the National Pitching Week and increase community awareness of solid waste issues and diversion opportunities. So Squamish has been part of the annual Pitching Week in Canada for many years. And last year we registered 34 groups for over 1,100 participants, diverting almost 9 tons of waste from the environment. During the week of April 22nd to April 29, for a 20-minute makeover will be held between the different departments of the district. And as well as on April 26, 2018, the fastest picker contest between students at Howsound Secondary School, council, media, and senior staff will be held at the skateboard park for 20 minutes. And council will have the opportunity to defend their honor as you won the 2017 contest. And we have the trophy. So it's a pretty nice one.
Trophy. Really
So that's it for me. If you have any questions.
Any questions, Council? No, this is a fun event we do with the students. They usually kick our butts, but last year we lucked out on a few big fines that put us over the top. So the media seems to lack in this competition a little bit. So I'm looking for them to up their game significantly. And just on that note, we usually do that same area in behind House Sound, and I must say, just on a general ongoing basis, the students at House Sound, the leadership classes have been really good at keeping that site much cleaner, and we don't find nearly as much waste as we used to in that area. So just kudos to the students who care for that area on an ongoing basis. The only thing I would say is that is the week that Councillor Race and I go to the SLRD, so the Wednesday or the Thursday might not work for us.
Okay.
Just to keep that in mind.
Thank you.
Just because we want to be there. So.
Yeah. Okay. Anytime we can set up a date and make sure that it's suitable for council as well.
Great.
Okay.
So I'm looking for a motion that we proclaim April 22nd to April 29th, 2018 as Pitching Week in Squamish. Moved by Councillor Chappelle, second by Councillor Elliott. All those in favor? Opposed, if any, motion carries. Thank you very much. Next up, we have Public Works Week. Excuse me. And our Public Works Coordinator.
Vanna White. Good evening, Mayor, Councilors, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Caroline Waters, and I am the Public Works Coordinator. I come before you this evening to request that the District of Squamish proclaim May 20th to 26th, 2018 as Public Works Week in the District of Squamish. This will be the 8th year that the district will be participating in the National Public Works Week. This is an annual celebration designed to inform and educate the public about the important role our public works services provide in the community. From providing clean water to disposing and treatment of solid waste to maintaining our roads and parks to removing snow and creating our beautiful hanging flower baskets in on the downtown streets. The services provided by your Public Works Department determine the quality of life we all enjoy in Squamish. My colleagues and I have been busy planning several events to take place over the week, including the traditional day with the elementary school children on Thursday, May 24th, where we set up 12 information stations for the children to learn about our fleet of equipment, how to conserve water, how we monitor our water systems, what happens when we flush the toilets, how we treat the wastewater, and much, much more. For all district staff, we're adding tours of the treatment plant, which is always a favorite, followed by a barbecue lunch, and we are working with the social committee to make it a fun time for district staff and council to come to the yard. We're including an equipment rodeo once again, which will give our staff an opportunity to get behind the controls of a loader or a snowplower, or even the new trails machine, and test their dexterity and spatial awareness. On May 23rd, there will be public tours of the treatment plant from 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. We changed it up this year because it's hard for the general public to come down during business hours. So we'll do it in the evening, and hopefully that'll get more public involved to come down and tour the treatment plant. We're also adding presentations to Quest University and Howe Sound Secondary that will include career information for all. In addition, the Director of Public Works, Bob Smith, is working with engineering and planning to tour some of our more challenging subdivisions in a tandem dump truck with a snowplow attached. This could attract some strange looks in May, but I hear CAO Linda Glende has already signed up to take a ride in the big truck. Over the years, the celebrations organized by district staff have been recognized by our provincial and national associations, and we've got some serious trophy envy coming from the city of Kamloops, so we want to keep winning these beautiful trophies. So I'd like to put forward a motion that the District of Squamish proclaim May 20th to 26th, 2018 as Public Works Week in the District of Squamish, and to request support and participation from Council.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from Council at this point? Okay. Councilor.
I really like how you've switched up some of the events and moved things to the evening, because I know the public is interested, and so I think more people will take advantage of that evening time. And I really love the idea of taking our staff out to see what it's like for operations, and so that's a great idea. So it's nice to see that collaboration across the different departments.
Bob, did you want to add anything, or you just wanted to show up? Yeah, no, and kudos to our Public Works Department, because we have won honors and accolades for this initiative, public engagement initiative, this awareness initiative for at least 4 years now, maybe even 5. So they do a phenomenal job on a day-to-day basis, but put a little extra effort into this initiative and have done a great job over the years, so kudos to you guys. Looking for a motion to proclaim May 20th to 26th as Public Works Week in the District of Squamish. Moved by Councillor Kent, seconded by Councillor Chabelle. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Consideration of unscheduled public attendance. Is there anyone in the audience who has an emergent matter that can't wait till the next council meeting? I don't see any. So we have 3 timed items. The first one is public hearing for District of Squamish zoning bylaw number 2011 amendment bylaw 3261 Friedel Crescent number 2552 2017. Excuse me. As part of any public hearing process, I legislatively need to read this, so just bear with me. This public hearing is convened pursuant to Part 14, Division 3 of the Local Government Act, to allow the public to make representations to council respecting matters contained in the proposed District of Squamish zoning bylaw number 2200-2011, amendment bylaw 2361 Friedel Crescent, number 2552 2017. Everyone present shall be given a reasonable opportunity to be heard or to present written submissions respecting matters contained in the proposed bylaw. No one will be discouraged or prevented from making these views known. However, it is important that remarks be restricted to the matters contained in the proposed bylaw. Members of council may ask questions following presentations. However, the function of council at a public hearing is to listen rather than to debate the merits of the proposed bylaw. In considering the proposed bylaw, council has received documents which may influence its decision. These documents are available for review and comment and have been included as part of the Planning Department report, or if received later, handed out at the meeting and included in the public hearing package. If any documents are submitted during the hearing, please feel free to review the document during the hearing by asking staff. Members of the public shall maintain order and quiet, shall not applaud or interrupt any speech or actions of members of council or any other person addressing council. I now call on the Planning Department to introduce the bylaw.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Jessie Fletcher, planner with Community Planning. Tonight I am presenting information on the rezoning application for 2361 Friedel Crescent prior to the public hearing. Zoning amendment bylaw 2552 was introduced to council on February 20th, 2018, and was given first and second readings at this meeting. Council also passed a motion that one condition must be met prior to consideration of adoption of the bylaw, which is provision of a voluntary community amenity contribution of $10,000 to the district. The subject property is located in the Garibaldi Highlands along Friedel Crescent, west of Merrill Park and north of the Boulevard. And the neighborhood character is residential, single detached dwellings. The inset map shows where the subject property is located in the greater neighborhood, with the red star indicating the property's location. The property is designated residential neighborhood in the official community plan. The property is zoned residential 1, RS1. Minimum lot size for RS1 is 690 square meters. Therefore, no subdivision opportunity exists under the current zoning. The surrounding neighborhood is also predominantly zoned RS1. Staff note that a restrictive covenant preventing subdivision is registered on title between the now defunct developer and the property owner. As this is a common law restrictive covenant, the district is not subject to it, has no obligation or authority to enforce it. The applicant has been made aware of the charge on title. The applicant is seeking to rezone a portion of the lot shown above as proposed lot B from RS1 to RS3, small lot residential. This would permit subdivision from 1 lot to 2 lots. The proposed lots have frontages of 26 meters for the larger lot with the existing home, that's indicated as Lot A on the site plan, and 31 meters for the smaller lot, Lot B. The proposed lot meets the minimum lot size for the RS3 zone, which is 250 square meters. The maximum floor area ratio for RS3 is 0.5. There is an existing single unit dwelling on the property located on Lot A. This is proposed to remain as it currently is. An interior lot line setback variance will be required for the home to remain. Following rezoning, the applicant will submit for subdivision with a concurrent application for DBP. This project proposal aligns with the residential neighborhood's OCP land use designation and is supportive of housing principles and policies for residential infill. The proposal provides additional small lot housing choice, which can be more affordable because of the smaller size, and the property is near a local school and local parks. The proposed CAC meets the interim CAC policy of $10,000 for each single detached lot above the existing zoning. The interim CAC policy includes park improvements and affordable housing as priorities for community amenities. The applicant has made an offer of $10,000. The Squamish Development and Project Communication Policy requires that applicants host a public information meeting regarding their development if 10 separate requests for a public information meeting are received within the 21-day period that the project is featured on the development showcase. For this application, only 1 request was made following the 21-day period. Notice of the public hearing for the rezoning was advertised in the Squamish Chief on March 8th and March 15th, 2018. Notice of the public hearing was mailed and delivered to all neighbors within 100 meters of the subject property. 5 comments have been received in relation to the public hearing, and none are in support of the proposed rezoning. The 5 comments were received following the publishing of the report package, and they have been added to report packages tonight. Again, none of the comments received support the rezoning and express concerns regarding smaller lots. The belief that smaller lots are not reflective of the neighborhood character, concerns regarding the change in density to the neighborhood. There were concerns regarding the impact on traffic volumes in the neighborhood and increases in on-street parking, and concerns that the rezoning would set a precedent for the neighborhood. Staff note that the Garibaldi Highlands is home to a variety of housing types and property types. While the single detached dwelling unit prevails, there are frontages along Leonard Place, duplexes around the Perth Road area, townhomes along Glacier View Drive, and that there are many single unit dwellings containing suites throughout the neighborhood. Staff recommend that, subject to the results of the public hearing, Council give Amendment Bylaw number 2552 2017 third reading.
Council, any questions for clarification purposes? Councilor Carr?
Could you just back up one page there? I was just reading what you had there. So,
That's just consideration of peer review.
okay.
Councilor Elliott?
The variances that you spoke to that would come forward after rezoning, that had to do with current building, not the proposed lot, is that right?
Through you, Mayor, the proposed variance is for the existing building to remain. There may also be variances with the proposed building, but they'll be dealt with through subdivision.
Yeah, I think the report spoke to one variance and possibly a second variance on the proposed new building and one variance on the existing building, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Can you back it up to the public comments, please? To the last one, that the rezoning would set a precedent for the neighborhood. Can you speak to that, would it?
Concerns received through you, Mayor, were regarding that if one rezoning were to be approved, that may instigate other properties to do the same in the neighborhood.
Councilor Shaw?
Are there many other densifications or RS3 zonings in this, not just on the Friedel question, but in the area?
Through your Mayor Heinzman, there are no other RS3 zone lots in the Garibaldi Highlands at this time, although there are smaller sized RS1 lots, specifically in the University neighborhood.
I don't see any more questions for council at this point. I have two speakers on my list. If you do want to speak, I encourage you to just go into the lobby and put your name down. If we get to the end of the speakers, of course, if you want to put your hand up, I'll acknowledge you and go up to the podium. So when I do call your name, I'll ask you to go up to the podium, state your name and your address, and if you represent yourself, a business or an organization. And firstly, I invite the applicant or representative to come speak to the proposed zoning. Is that you, Mr. Good? On deck
Evening,
is
Mayor
Elijah.
and Council. My name is Peter Gordon. I live at 1211 Village Green Way. I'm representing the applicant this evening. The property in question is located at 2361 Friedel Crescent. It is a large lot, and this application is an infill situation, specifically subdividing the property into two single-family lots. The subdivision was created in the mid-1960s when single-family lots were quite large, and a number of them will likely be coming up for some form of carriage home or other densification as time comes on. It was noted this evening that a number of homes have suites in the basements. It's interesting to note that both of the adjoining properties to the subject lot were subdivided in previous years. Landmark being one and the other on the west side as well. The proponent has, retained a well-known local designer, Jamie Martin, to design the home for the newly created lot. I believe that Mr. Martin has designed a very tasteful-looking home that is in keeping with the neighborhood, and he's done a number of homes in the Squamish area. As mentioned, this is an infill subdivision. The term that is often used is gentle intensification, as it is sometimes referred. And this matter, we believe, is in keeping with our OCP. At the completion of the development, we'll have two homes, all constructed to 2018 energy conservation requirements. To help address both the housing affordability and the diversity issue, each home will have its own basement rental unit, each with on-site parking accommodation. Recently, Alex Austin, a fellow with SFU's Renewable Cities program, stated that just 1 in 10 homeowners created a secondary suite. The government of BC would meet 3/4 of its campaign promise of 114,000 new affordable units. I therefore feel that this subdivision makes eminent sense in this regard. It has been noted that there is a covenant on the property that goes back to 1965. As was noted at the first and second reading, we have consulted a lawyer on this, Ian Davis, QC of Racing Company. The opinion is that the covenant is old and was put in place at a time when Squamish was, the Garibaldi Highlands was an unorganized area. It wasn't part of the district of Squamish at that time, and therefore had no zoning bylaw in place. It did come into the district of Squamish in 1967, and you will note that further sections of the Garibaldi Highlands subdivision that were developed from 1967 on do not have a covenant in place. So Mr. Good, the developer at the time, felt that it was the best way to bring some kind of design criteria and control to the area. And we believe it's outdated at this point, and that the District of Squamish zoning bylaw does take precedent in a lot of areas. So, in conclusion, I feel that this small lot subdivision is a sensible matter and we're here to approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Elijah Dan is the only other person I have on my list, so please let me know if you want to speak. Okay.
Thank you, Pat. Mayor
Pat,
and council members, I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you briefly about this amendment.
Sorry, can you just state your address and if you represent yourself, a business or an organization?
Yes, I just represent myself. I'm a resident. I live at 2409 Friedel Crescent.
Thank you.
And in fact, I find that to be somewhat of an irony, given that in the applicant's submission to council, they stated that their residents and the residents that I now live in, the owners, their respective owners, and my respective owner was Pat Good. And I built my house originally, as you know, he named Friedel Crescent after his wife. Friedel. So I feel I have some stake in this matter. Not only that, but I'm adjacent to them, their property. And I don't find anything of our neighborhood outdated. I resent that. I feel nothing in its original development had anything ancient about it or antiquated or not thought out. I believe that Mr. Good, if you were here today, and the original owner of their residence, they would have objected to exactly what they're doing today, trying to what they call gentle intensification. This is not gentle intensification by any means. Stating it's a large lot, I'd ask councilors to take a look at the image of the lot. I sent pictures along in my submission. This is a lot that triangulates. It's not a large lot. Not of the sort that often you see carriage homes built on. Moreover, this Friedel Crescent is a widely used thoroughfare for children to walk to school. There is no sidewalk. The children in and about those streets all take that road right now to get to school every day. There's pedestrians, bikers right there. There's no sidewalk. There are no cars parked on that road now. There will be. That'll change. Whatever problem the densification emphasis is trying to solve, this is no way to implement it in this neighborhood. And it certainly doesn't make housing more affordable. I just ask you to consider a couple of things. With the present residence in question, instead of the house being available for, let's say the purchase was around $900,000 plus perhaps, instead of that house being available for a family to move in with a nice lawn for children to play on, as well as other children playing on the lawn, which they play on my property all the time with my encouragement. Instead, this went to a developer who purchased it. They purchased the property, they're renovating the house, that's fine. But now they're trying to parcel off that property to build another house. So I'm asking you, what will be the selling prices of those two new homes now? Now on half the size of the original property. Income suites with tenants, perhaps, that might help some housing, but this doesn't address the fundamental problem of housing and this intensification, which I use as pejorative in our neighborhoods right now. our neighborhood should not be turned into a sort of slot machine by this sort of so-called development. I'd like you to think about the wider picture here. By parceling off this property and stuffing an extra house on the lot will only increase the cars parked on the road. And this is something all around the bigger problems by increasing demands on the infrastructure, the roads and schools. We should note that this way of trying to solve a problem does not take into account the consequences. We already see the consequences of this way of doing it. After building a new housing behind Quest and Thunderbird Ridge, try driving down Mount Quinn Road. The left-hand turn now onto the expressway can be over a block long in the mornings, an increase of what I would say 30 to 40% traffic over the past few years. Each of these new homes doesn't just increase traffic by one car. If there's an income suite with the home, there could easily be an extra 4 or 5 cars added to the road. We've already seen that in our neighborhoods. Whatever problems housing has for us in Squamish, I would think our lack of imagination dealing with the problem shouldn't justify this sort of densification by developers in Squamish. That's not how our neighborhood was originally envisioned or built for, and I believe the original owners of this home would attest to that. Let's provide affordable housing to people wishing to move here, but in a responsible and sustainable way. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Matt Blackman. On deck is Cheryl Weeks.
My name is Matt Blackman. My address is 40743 Thunderbird, so I'm up the hill from this development. I missed the rezoning application for 2305 Momcom Road, which is an almost identical situation to this. And I wasn't aware, I didn't go through the process with them because I wasn't around when it happened. But what is there now is what has to be described as a dog's breakfast. It looks like a bunker. It's very unattractive as you drive up to the Highlands. And I'm really concerned, obviously that set a precedent because now we have this application. I'm really concerned that this sets a dangerous precedent for our area, which is a residential RS1, predominantly RS1 neighborhood. And yes, we do have some townhouses, but I don't think this is in keeping with our neighborhood. It's going to increase occupancy by 400%. We go from 1 family to 4 families now, which is, that's a 400% increase, which is nothing, which is a large increase. So again, I just don't like what's happening. I don't see it as being, I think it detracts from the neighborhood, detracts from the area, and I do not support, I oppose this point. I do not support it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Cheryl Weeks, and on deck is Warren McDougall.
Mayor, Council, thank you very much. I reside at 4041 Friedel, Crescent in the Highlands. I missed the previous readings, and of course it was important for me to be down here. So what I can tell you initially about where we live is my husband and I bought our place at 40418 Friedel because we wanted to live in a single family home area. We moved here at 7.5 months pregnant for the purpose of living in Squamish in a house with a yard. That being said, my son now goes to the local elementary school, and I can tell you that rezoning and now learning, and I didn't know it was 4 properties. I understand it's 2 structures, but 2 rental suites as well. I've written council on multiple times, so has my husband, about the amount of traffic that goes down Friedel right now, the speeds that they travel at, the number of cars that are parked on the street at the moment. And I can echo the previous speaker there in that I can't walk safely with my son to school. I've been honked at because I've been forced onto the roadway by parked cars. Things like that. This development will affect the neighborhood and lose its character. And it's the last RS1 neighborhood in Squamish, essentially. If you go further up the road, yes, there's townhouses, but in that Braemar, Air, the lower part of Skyline, Friedel, and everything else, it's all single-family homes. In addition to that, if you look at the school nearby, they're already building portables because we don't have the infrastructure to support the number of people moving there, the number of children moving there. And I can speak wholeheartedly when I say from Skyline to Landmark, I know of 5 houses that are multifamily already. That's just on my street. So that puts cars. Right now there's a pickup truck with a giant cargo trailer parked there because somebody has rented out. If you go on some of the Facebook pages for Squamish renters, there are people renting the rooms in the Highlands for $900 a month. Not legal speaks, not anything else, but it just speaks to the sheer volume of the population that is growing up there. And to add property, although I'm sure it will look beautiful, it doesn't make sense because we don't have the structure to do it. When your kids are walking to school, when your families are buying in there with the sole purpose of having a yard in a single family home. And my husband and I wholeheartedly don't support this project at all. And I actually know the previous owners of that home because of what I do for a living. And I think they would be heartbroken to know that their mom's house, she used to walk her pub behind that yard. So I think they would be heartbroken to learn that this is happening and that gentrification that growing neighborhoods is not what Friedel can support. It just can't. The high density housing is just the wrong neighborhood for it. There's so many other options in Squamish to put those things together.
Thank you. Warren McDougall, and that's the end of my list, so if you would like to speak, just put your hand up and I'll acknowledge you.
Hi, Warren McDougall, 2340 Friedel, Crescent, so I'm almost across the street from this rezone. I want to point out that it's already been mentioned, this is a 400% increase for, there's going to be 4 families instead of 1, there's going to be 4 times the traffic. You can drive down Friedel now and you can see exactly which house has a suite. There is zero weight control parking for suites, and quite frankly, most owners that are living upstairs don't want the tenants parked in the driveway. So it's a major problem on the street, on the very corner, on the old corner on Air Drive, as you're coming down towards Friedel. It's a hazard, a real hazard. So you've got this property that's going to be 400% from what it is now, four homes. If you look, there's what I can see here. So to the west of my house, so directly across from my front windows, those lots are, some of them are in excess of an acre in size. If you compare those lots, if this gets put through and changed to R3, the potential for those is 5 or 6 homes, which is 10 to 12 families, 10 to 12 sets of vehicles. That's potentially 2 for each unit. So there's 20, 30 cars from one family lot. If this gets passed, there is nothing stopping from any one of those homeowners to do the same thing, the property owners, especially if the property gets sold. So that is a major, major change to a very quiet neighborhood. I'm a lifelong resident. I was born here, and my children growing up in that street. I chose this street very carefully for the greenery, for the oversized lots, for the non-congestion, for the non-traffic, for all the reasons that it's like it is today. I don't want that changing, and it should not be changed. You cannot, if one goes through, there's no end to it. There's been 2 people mentioned the townhouses. Those townhouses were put in at the same time Glacier View was put in. So every single homeowner on Glacier View knew that those townhouses were there. They weren't snuck in after the fact. There's no other, as far as I know, there's nothing else other than R1. The same with any of the duplexes. They're in certain pockets of land. I think Promenade Drive, I'm not certain exactly where they are. They were all constructed at the same time. And they're sort of to one designated area. So that has no bearing on this as well. This entire lower area of the Highlands is all R1. There's, and as well, there's parking should be, this is a little off topic, but with regards to the suites, council should be looking at any further suites or carriage rooms that are allowed. Off-street parking should be mandatory. Is it for the safety of the children that are playing in the area, cars that are, you know, and the other, I want to finish this by saying that if you take an area like J Crescent, for example, those are undersized, in my view, undersized lots. People buy there, they want the home rather than the land. I did the opposite, and everybody in my area did the same. So if you want a tiny little lot, you buy in an area like that. You know you're buying in an area like that. So we've got that all over. So you've got J Crescent, you've got some of the university lots, but you're going into those areas knowing all the lots are undersized. I don't have that option if this gets passed. I bought based on the size and the non-crowding of the whole area. So I hope it stays as it is. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would like to speak at this public hearing? I'll quickly go to council to see if there's any questions for clarification. Councillor Blackmore.
Can staff review what are the parking requirements when there is a secondary suite or carriage home?
Through you, Mayor, for each secondary suite and or carriage home, the applicant is required to provide one additional off-street parking space.
Councilor Pratt?
It's one off-street parking stall for a house? What is it?
Through you, Mayor, one additional off-street parking space per secondary suite or carriage home. A home is required to provide 2 off-street parking spaces for the primary residence.
Well, just a couple of questions. The setbacks, I didn't see that, reduction in the setbacks. It said that when this one goes in, the existing house has to have a reduction in setback.
Maybe clarify the 3 variances that are in the report. Potential variance.
So if the rezoning is approved, and if the property owners want to then subdivide the property according to the zoning, before they can subdivide it, then the existing house will have to get a variance. We'll have to go for a variance process to allow for that house to remain where it is. Because the subdivision, the new property line will be too close to the house.
Yeah, so 5 feet, 3 feet?
I think it's half a meter or so.
Yeah, and it will be to the new property, so the vacant
Yeah,
lot.
I understand that. Oh, well, then just
And just on that, Councilor Pryor, there's likely 2 other variances on the proposed new building as well. At least that's what the report said.
That is correct, yes.
well, let's hear those as well.
Any more questions?
Well, that is a question. Yeah. The 2 other variances are?
Through you, Mayor, at this time, they have not submitted an application for the 2 variances. They will come forward with a subdivision application if the rezoning is approved. I believe the variances will be proposed to the front setback and to projection into the side setback, but those will be worked through the next application process.
So in our bylaws, council created these new small lot bylaws to increase density. Do you know how many of these ones we've done where we've subdivided lots? Just roughly?
There's 2, 3, 4. There have been 5 applications to rezone to RS3 and then subdivide.
Over the last 4 departments. There was a couple before this term.
And what happens if people can buy 2 houses and lot consolidate, but they'd have to go through a rezoning?
No, they wouldn't have to go for a rezoning, although when you consolidate lots, you have to make sure that the new lot meets the density requirements. So, let's say you can only have 1 house per lot, and you have 2 properties with 2 houses on it, you can consolidate without having to take out one of the homes or decommissioning one of the homes.
Councilor LeBlanc?
In this particular circumstance, would there be frontage improvements like sidewalks or anything required in this scenario?
Through you, Mayor, engineering has reviewed the project and would likely require cash in lieu during subdivision, but that'll be determined at subdivision, so not as part of the rezoning.
So just to clarify, RS3 zoning, you're allowed to have either a carriage house or a secondary suite?
Correct.
And RS1 zoning goes without saying. I did see another hand right there. Yeah, you have to come up, sorry, you have to come up to the podium.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
I just had a quick question, and it dawned on me when you were speaking earlier about that this is the only application. And I might be incorrect, but on the corner of Skyline and the Boulevard, there is another bulletin board up, which I believe is our SR1 or whatever, 2 or 3 as well. Which is 2 houses down for me, is about 6 around the corner for this project. It's right on the corner of Skyline and Boulevard. And I believe they're asking for the exact same thing, which speaks to what's happening to our neighborhood.
Thank you. Council, any other questions, clarification? I'll go to, yes, Councilor Pryor?
So how do we approve something without knowing the variances? And what if the variances come in and we're going like, oh, I don't support that variance?
You should know the answer to that, Council Prior.
Yeah, but I mean, so we
If the
send it
variance
to
isn't
third
approved,
reading.
then the project isn't approved.
We send it to third reading without knowing the variances, then chances are, what happens if it doesn't get approved then? The guy's wasted all that money?
Oh, what would that, the impact would be that, one, either the, let's say the variance for the existing house isn't approved. That means that in order to subdivide it, the house would have to, we'd have to take down part of the house. And for the new lot, that would just mean a smaller house.
Any other questions from council? Councilor Elliott.
If it stayed an RS1 lot, could they put a carriage house on that piece of property?
Yes, they could, yes.
Thank you. I'll go back to the public to see if there's anyone who'd like to speak to this public hearing. At the back, and then.
My name's Jimmy Martin. I live in 1109 Plateau Crescent, and it's my job to design this house. And the goal was to provide off-street parking. So, that was the main thing to do here. So we did provide over 2 stalls for this property. So it's a very tight lot, but with the variance is given, and the driveway, we reorganized the driveway from the initial design, which made for better parking, for off-street, on-site parking. Sorry.
Thank you. Yeah, Matt, and then,
Matt Black from 407 4th Street, Thunderbird. I'm just wondering, is this something that council is going to be doing more of? I know we do need more accommodation, we need affordable housing, but filling in areas that people bought expecting to have RS1, and then all of a sudden they find out they have many more neighbors and much more traffic. Is this something that council is being pressured to accept and move forward on, or is there going to be a certain amount of discretion here?
it's not technically part of the public hearing in front of us, but council has been open on a one-on-one basis considering them, yes.
Because I'd just like to note that the carriage house could be put on that property, which would be less impact, and it would be a nice middle of the road.
Thank you.
I was going to speak of carriage homes. So I'm all for carriage home in this area. What I'm absolutely opposed to is the lot subdivision, because as I said, we could have a 1,200% increase on one single unit across the street from the other side. So this could easily fit a carriage house. It is well a carriage house, unless I'm wrong, cannot accommodate a suite. So that's only 300% increase, not 400%. So that also fits well better in the area. But the main thing is, yeah, I'm not opposed to carriage homes, and I'm sure it would look great on it. And it would be less invasive to the whole area and no chance of other properties being chopped up.
Thank you. I will get staff to clarify on an RS1 lot, can you have both an in-home suite and a carriage house?
Through area, yes, you can have both a carriage house and a secondary suite and a single family.
So just theoretically, the large lot, likely the small lot couldn't accommodate it, but the large lot, you could have principal dwelling, an in-home suite, and a carriage house on that large lot, in theory.
Yes, if they could accommodate the parking and met the lot coverage and the maximum floor area ratio.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak at this public hearing? Council, are there any questions for clarification purposes?
Well, I know it's inappropriate, but
No, then don't say it. You've gone over this, Councilor Clark. This is a public hearing, so keep your pleas to questions.
my thoughts to myself.
Well, you will have an
What about
opportunity to
that,
speak to it, but we're just here to answer questions. Do you have a question? No.
Well, I do have a question.
Then go ahead.
We did, this is like Jeopardy. We did have a lot on Mampton Road. How many lots did they get out of that big lot? Mampton and Garibaldi Way.
Through your mayor, was one additional lot was created through that rezoning and subdivision.
And then we did one in Valley Cliff. How many was on that one?
Through your mayor, that created
Two
two
additional
additional lots, also in RS3.
You did frame in front of the question, that's good.
I could continue on, but I see what's happening.
Elijah?
Dan, 2409 Friedel Crescent. I'd just like it to maybe be on the record that, and as far as the carriage house is concerned, the difficulty that I and my neighbor have had in 1000, she is adjacent to me up on the hill, and her property slopes down towards the proposed subdivision and the carriage house. And since the developers came in, they haven't spoke to either of us, never told us that they would go down to our property, my property in particular, and dig a deep trench to do whatever work they needed to do. No word whatsoever. I went down, I saw that trench had been dug on my property. The fill for that was placed on Dot's property. Dot is 94 years old, right? And her property comes down slopes. They didn't talk to us. I had that property surveyed when I moved into that property. That pin that was placed in the ground was moved by whoever did the back point and just stuck to the side of the trench. The property stake was moved out of the way. There was no cordoning off for the children during that day. The pit was right beside the road. When they filled in that hole, they left debris, brush, garbage bags from that on my property and Dot's property. I finally talked to the developer and I said, you know, if I took a backhoe onto 8 feet of your sodded lawn and put the fill beside it, how would you like that? The fact that this is forest, my property is forest, and it's green, doesn't make it a dumping spot. Wasn't too happy about that. And so I'd just like to ask, I don't know who I have to talk to now, either my lawyer or what, but to get that property pin replaced, and so we know exactly where those variances are.
You're a little off topic on the public hearing.
Well, that's good, but just so,
Thank you.
Wanted to say it. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak at this public hearing?
I just have a quick question for council.
Yeah, you got to get to the podium.
Yep, sorry.
Thanks.
40418 Friedel Crescent. In the overall plan for Squamish, we know we have a housing issue. We know that we have, we're battling a bedroom community issue where people are buying tiny little lots, tiny little apartments and commuting to the city because it's all they can afford. I would implore you to explore what the bigger plan here is. Because allow 1, allow 2, allow 3, and it will continue to snowball. And then all of a sudden you have a giant bedroom community where several folks, including myself, bought to have a yard, to have a house, to have all of that. And yes, I'm as guilty as the next. I work in the city, but I'm very invested in this community and in Squamish as a whole. And so if you look at me versus some of the people, my neighbors are in their 90s and they're fantastic people. And I'm the new generation coming into this and I want to hold on to what we have. So I would ask council, like, what's your bigger picture here? If we have townhouses going up, apartments going up, and now we're going to subdivide the Highlands, where's the buy-in to keep this community what it is?
Thank you. I'm going to go back to the public. Is there anyone, I see you, Councillor Pryor. Is there anyone else who would like to speak at this public hearing? I'll ask one more time. Is there anyone who would like to speak at this public hearing? Councillor Pryor, question?
What difference in size would the small house be as opposed to the carriage house?
Well, what's the maximum size of a carriage house?
So the maximum size of a carriage house is 70 square meters of gross floor area, and they can also have a garage below. That's also 70 square meters gross floor area. Based on their property, the proposed property, they could have a max of just over 200 square meters gross floor area because of the floor area ratios are 0.5.
So just for those people who still work in feet, it's about 900 something feet, isn't it, for the carriage house?
With the garage, it's 1,400.
So the carriage house, the living area would be around 750 square feet. And the buildable area for a house would probably be around 2,000 square feet.
On a lot this size?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Is that at hand or no? Okay. I'm going to ask 3 times now for if anyone would like to speak at the public hearing. I'm going to ask a second time. Is there anyone who would like to speak at the public hearing? And I'm going to ask a third time. Is there anyone who would like to speak at the public hearing? There being no further speakers, I will now declare the public hearing closed. At this point, council can consider third reading today if they so choose. If they want to deliberate more, they can do that, consider third reading at another date. I am going to look to council. I have 2 more timed items, but I realize there's a lot of people here on this particular issue. Would council like to consider third reading at this time? Is there anyone who would like to move third reading? I think for clarity's sake, even if council would like to reject third reading, it's best to make the motion and consider it. Okay. Moved by Councillor Pryor, seconded by Councillor Chappelle. Councillor Pryor, do you want to speak to your motion?
Yeah, I would. I've watched large lot, in large neighborhoods with the large lots, nice big old neighborhoods, have these subdivisions going in. And I can't personally say I like them because I live on a large lot and I see them coming down my street toward me, and I don't really like them. I motion to support the large lot or the small lot subdivision in the name of creating some more affordable housing. So I supported that. And sometimes you support one thing, you don't really know where it's going to affect you. Like the young lady said, there's one down the street. It's got the sign on it, and I'm not sure if that one doesn't even have a commercial component to it. It might even have a little store proposed for that one. So, and I really cherish these old neighborhoods, but, you just see it creeping in everywhere.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak to this? Councillor Blackman?
Okay, yeah, I mean, I totally understand the desire for people to want, if they're very satisfied with their neighborhood, to not want that character to change. For me, though, we do also have to think about future residents. We also have to think about the environment. Squamish is growing quite a bit, and I just think that if we have to think about if everybody had 1 acre lot or 3/4 acre lot, what would the impact be on the surrounding area? And thankfully now architecture and design has advanced to the stage where we have some different options. I'm sympathetic to some of the issues around traffic there. I'm certain that staff could consider some options around, perhaps maybe there should be no parking on one side of the street and put up signs to do that, given that there is no sidewalk there just yet. And as far as illegal suites, those are illegal suites. So, bylaw will respond if there are issues around illegal suites. And this is precisely what we're trying to avoid by actually formalizing a process where, we can have proper off-street parking for new developments. So, for me, I think that the way that this was designed, it does make appropriate use, and I don't think that we should freeze one particular neighborhood of Squamish. I don't think that's fair to all the rest of the residents, because it means that we have to squeeze in more people elsewhere, and I think we all have to be good citizens and accept some of the change that happens. And I don't think that any neighborhood is entitled to have their neighborhood frozen the way they like it. And when you do buy a lot, you can do what you want with your lot, and nobody's forcing you to sell your house or to get rid of your lot, but it is a chance that neighborhoods do evolve over time. I'm sure we never envisioned townhouses in Squamish, but look what we have now. So I'm going to be supporting the variance, or sorry, the zoning.
Councillor Kent.
I can't support nor third reading. I understand the comments made by the people that live in that neighborhood about opening up Pandora's box and having this profligate throughout the community up there. I think, you know, the idea of coming to us and wanting to subdivide and then asking for forgiveness on the variances is kind of, anyway, I can't support it.
Thank you. Dr. Schwab.
Thanks. I am conflicted on this because I understand the comments that were made by the people that live in the area, but I feel the same way as Councillor Beckman-Wolf. I wonder about densification in areas of high value for the ecology of Squamish and densifying on carbon sinks in the lower mainland, you know, in the lower lands, in flood areas and in areas that are going to be suspects of flooding and climate change. And if you look at what Pat Good intended to densify up in the highlands. He intended to have, he built the infrastructure so that it could go right up Perth Avenue into the Chimalands. And I've been very clear that I'm not supportive of immense densification on areas of green space, but you know, throwing another house on a really large lot does not seem unreasonable. And I appreciate using percentages like 300, 400%, but when you're talking about 300, 400% of one or two, it's very different than talking about percentages that are higher and actually have an effect. But adding one house to an area in the Highlands does not seem like an unreasonable ask for this area. And yeah, it may bring a lot of applications, and people are within their rights to make application for the lots that they own. And if you're a single family homeowner and like that lifestyle and want your kids to have a yard, it's within your right to keep that character for your kids and for yourself. And it's also within the rights of property owners to make application and densify their lots. And it makes a lot more sense. This infrastructure is a lot newer. The sidewalk complaints and the walking your kids, I completely agree with that. I do think that when people densify these lots, it shouldn't just go into a pot, but it should be that you're required to put in sidewalk and infrastructure so that it makes the area a little bit safer for kids to walk to school. But adding one house, I can't, you know, living in the downtown, I just don't see that adding one house. My kids ride around the downtown and feel safe because we still are a smaller town than other areas. And we are putting in infrastructure and thinking about active transportation. And I don't see that one lot change is going to affect the entire character of the neighborhood or cause a snowball. And it is for future residents to move into the neighborhood. Without future residents, we maintain a low tax base and actually don't have amenities for future citizens.
Thank you, Councillor Elliott.
Well, I have to say that I still don't know which way I'm going to vote. You know, I look at the Highlands and there's nothing that makes it walkable. There's no density that supports transit. There's no density that supports a neighborhood hub. There's no sidewalks, so it is really dodgy for kids to get to school. It's one of our problem areas for safe routes to school. I live down on a neighborhood that is densified, and by the end of this summer, possibly fall, I have sidewalks all the way to school for my kids. It's awesome. I have a ton of new neighbors, which I love. It makes my neighborhood interesting. I'm about to get a commercial hub, which I'm looking forward to. There are benefits to density, and you know, one thing I'm looking forward to is that we will begin neighborhood planning, and I think that neighbors should have a say in how density happens in their neighborhood. But you know, people want transit, people will need to accept density, and that's just fundamentally how we can pay for that kind of thing, and how we pay for infrastructure as well. We need to add density. You know, I think the Highlands community will want to have a say in how that happens. And I think that say is coming. Will one small lot subdivision really change things for that community? I don't think so. I think council's used its discretion wisely in the past. So I don't know. I'll just let it.
Thanks. I got it. I generally agree that this type of thing council should be open to. If you look at how these subdivisions were developed, there's probably not very many lots that would actually fit the criteria to be able to subdivide. But on this specific lot, particularly because there's possibly 3 variances, it just feels like squeezing a square into a circle. So on this particular one, I'm not going to support the rezoning, but I do generally believe that there is opportunity to create these subdivisions within some neighborhoods on certain lots. Councillor Carr.
And when we did this bylaw to create these small lots, like I say, I supported that bylaw. And then I saw it encroach in my nice neighborhood with big lots. And I didn't like it. Just about everyone we've done, I mean, out of the 5 that we've done, maybe two turned out okay to me. And the other ones are like, they don't fit. Also with the variances on it, I mean, I think a carriage house would go great in there. And so I'm going to go with my gut feeling and say, without knowing those variances, I don't like to support something without knowing the variances. If the neighborhood planning that Councillor Elliott's talking about, we're going into neighborhood planning, so every neighborhood will have a say in how their plans unfold. If the planning in that neighborhood plan comes out for a subdivision, then subdivide. I mean, like the young lady was saying, there's one coming down the street, and I think there's commercial in that one. And so, I mean, things are changing, but I'll go with the carriage house on this one.
I am going to add one more thing. There is a covenant on this, and even though we don't have necessarily a say in that, there is still a covenant there, and so it just further reinforces my position that this particular rezoning isn't supportable. Councillor Schwab.
Yeah, I take Councillor Pryor's points really. I just keep thinking about the variances and doing it backwards and not really understanding how the variances are going to affect the property. I don't mind a carriage house on it, it adds equal density. I'm conflicted as well. I'm thinking maybe pushing, it'd be great to have some time to think about it, but it's on the table now, so we have to vote on it. So
I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Kent, Councillor Elliott, Councillor Pryor, Councillor Chappelle, and Mayor Hudson. Opposed, motion fails. Thank you very much. Why don't we take a 2-minute recess just to allow the room to clear? We are back in our business meeting of March 20th. We are now on Community Development Infrastructure Temporary Use Permit number 57, Scott Crescent Sales Center.
Thank you, Mayor. My name is Jonas Sonish.
Oh, hey, actually. Because this is a temporary use permit, we do have a public process, and I'm just going to read this statement very quickly. The proponent and members of the public will be given the opportunity to be heard or to present written submissions respecting the following requested temporary use permit: application for permitted temporary use, commercial use for real estate sales center and associated parking lot and landscaping. After I've confirmed that it is your turn to speak, please approach the podium and commence your remarks by clearly stating your name and address. And if you represent yourself, a business or organization, please note that speakers will be given a maximum of 5 minutes to address council.
Thank you, Mayor. My name is Jonas Sonish, Director of Community Planning. I'm presenting on behalf of Gary Hamilton tonight, and I'll be presenting the TUP application for property at 1583 Scott Crescent. The TUP is for the purpose of Scott Crescent Development Sales Center. So the subject property is located on Scott Crescent. The land use designation is downtown in our official community plan, and the site was rezoned to CD's Comprehensive Development Zone 77 in 2014 and recently updated. The existing building is located on the north lands of the Scott Crescent development, which are intended for future townhomes and 2 apartment buildings as the final phase 5 and 6 of the development. The north lands do not permit commercial usage, which is why this temporary use permit is required. If approved, the temporary use permit will allow for the use of a period of 3 years. It's the maximum length of time for a temporary use permit. The owners of the Crescent development site have applied for a TP in order to refurbish the existing warehouse to accommodate the temporary Crescent development sales center. Details of the proposed sales center and associated landscape and servicing plans are included in the staff report. The key elements of the proposed sales center are a new use includes a display area, a display suite, offices, and washrooms. Exterior renovations include significant upgrades to the south side of the building with a new window wall and front entrance canopy, a cement paneling finish, and new flashings are proposed for the other exterior upgrades. Landscaping upgrades proposed include 45 trees along with extensive shrubs and ferns. A storm swale is proposed along the west stormwater management along the west side for stormwater management, and the drive aisle and parking are included for 14 stalls. The drive aisle will be paved along with a 3-meter wide multi-use path on the east side to accommodate active transportation from Scott Crescent. A blanket access easement will be a condition of the TP issuance to allow for public access on the site. And lastly, a central, partially enclosed bear safe waste facility is located at the entrance of the building, or will be located. Other considerations have also been taken into account with this application. There are flood implications, but however, the building is already in existence, so there is an exemption for the flood construction level. The site is already fully serviced with district's water and sewer. The renovations and addition of non-permeable surface has triggered the need for storm drainage upgrades to the site, which can be found on Schedule C in the report. The existing industrial building is located on a contaminated site. A contaminated site review by the province is not required for a temporary use permit application, but will be required for the site alteration. And lastly, the site is within a high archaeological area. If an archaeological site is encountered during development activities, must be halted, and the provincial branch that deals with it is contacted for direction. A development sign was posted on the property. Statutory requirements for public notification were also administered. Notice of a TUP consideration were mailed and delivered to owners and occupants within 200 meters of the property, and it was advertised in the chief, and no public comments were received. The official community plan allows council to consider TUPs in this area, and staff recommend the approval of the temporary use permit subject to provision of a removal deposit, essentially 50,000, a referral to the Department of Fisheries and Oceans for stormwater outflow proposed in the upper compliant channel, and a blanket access easement registered on title to allow general public access to the site.
Thank you. Councillors, any questions for clarification purposes? I don't see any. Would anyone like to speak to this temporary use permit? I'm going to the public right now, correct? Any from the public, would they like to speak to this temporary use permit? I'll ask for a second time, is there anyone who would like to speak to this temporary use permit? And I'll ask for a third time if there's anyone who would like to speak to this temporary use permit. See anybody? Councillor Pryor?
I'd just like to say it's nice to see the reuse of the existing structure.
Well, let's put a motion on the floor, unless there's any more questions.
I'll motion
Moved by Councillor Pryor, seconded by Councillor Black and Wolf. Councillor Pryor?
Yes, I'm happy to see the use of the existing, structure. Even there may even be some historical flair put into it to help with the design of the new buildings going in there. And I was just wondering about the pedestrian bridge. If that was in there, all the people working there could just walk downtown and grab their lunch. Is there any timing on that?
It's not technically part of this TUP, Councillor Cryer.
I'm done, man.
It's not part of this TUP.
I'm asking them.
We have a motion on the floor that is regarding this TUP, so we need to stick to the TUP. After the fact, you can go and ask them directly. Any other comments on the temporary use permit? I'll briefly speak to it. Yeah, it looks really good, a vast improvement to what's currently there. I'm glad to see the repurposement of the, is that a word, repurposement? I didn't think it was, that came out of my mouth. The repurposing of this building, I think, I'm happy to support the TUP. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Next timed item is a DP with, and so that was for the whole shooting match, just so. Next DP is development permit number 473-3966 Government Road. And this is development permit number 473. The proponent and members of the public will be given an opportunity to be heard or to present written submissions respecting the following requested variance to the District of Squamish zoning bylaw. Variance to the interior side setback from 3 meters along the eastern property line to 2.55 meters along the eastern property line. Section 39D Mixed Use District 1, subsection 39D.5A, minimum setbacks for principal buildings. Variance to section 42, off-street loading, subsection 42.4, off-street loading requirement from 3 off-street loading spaces to 2 off-street loading spaces. After I confirm that it is your turn to speak, please approach the podium and commence your remarks by clearly stating your name and address. Please note that speakers will be given a maximum of 5 minutes to address council. Go ahead.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Jessie Fletcher, planner of Community Planning and Infrastructure. Today I'm presenting to you a development permit 473 located at 39666 Government Road, known as the North Yards. DP 473 is located in the southwest reach of the North Yards neighborhood. The property is outlined in yellow on the map above. It's located in the mixed-use district, MUD 1, along Government Road, just north of the Sea to Sky Business Park. It is located just east of the rail yard. Currently, a single-family home is on the property, and it is surrounded along the east, south, and west by single-family homes. An application for a development permit has been received for the property immediately to the west. North of the property is more single-family homes. 39666 Government Road is zoned Mixed-Use District 1, MUD 1. It was rezoned along with the adjacent parcels to MUD 1 in May of 2017. The project is contained within Area 3 of the MUD 1 zone. It is located within Development Permit Area 6, Squamish Industrial Park, a DPA area established to regulate the form and character of new development in the Sea to Sky Business Park. The property is within a flood hazard area and is adjacent to a secondary floodway. Because the property is committing to 100% purpose-built rental, it is a priority application. Staff note that there are 2 other current priority applications for development permit in the surrounding area, and those are the properties outlined in red above. The Community Development Committee recommended that projects that are 100% purpose-built rental be considered priority applications. Some of the benefits of being a priority application means the application only requires 1 trip to advisory design panel, and that the applicant takes priority on forthcoming agendas. This application is being treated as a priority application because the applicant has committed to 100% purpose-built rental secured through a housing agreement. Issuance of the development permit is recommended to be on the condition of the housing agreement being entered into by bylaw and registered on title. The housing agreement will be considered later tonight. The project has 2 variances associated with it. Staff would like to clarify that the Local Government Act allows variances to be considered by council in accordance with a development permit as opposed to through the development variance permit process, as long as the variances are in relation to the treatment of form and character of the building. The proposal is for a 4-story building with a 2-level parkade. Commercial space is proposed at grade with office space proposed for 40% of the 2nd story. Neighborhood commercial is a permitted use at this location, and office space is permitted on the second story. 40 units of purpose-built market rental residential units are proposed on stories 2 through 4. The proposed building is 17.3 meters tall, which is permitted. The majority of the building siding is hardy panel in either dark or light gray. It is accented with brown tone brick siding along the entry plaza and on the development side. Steel columns are proposed along the exterior of the first story, and vinyl black windows are proposed throughout. Site architectural and landscape plans are provided in Schedules A through D in your report package this evening. A detailed review of the compliance to DPA guidelines can be found in Appendix A of the report. The project complies with DPA guidelines. Landscape plans include seating, areas for future seating, raised planting beds, plaza area, and a trail that extends along the western and southern property lines, providing opportunities for future intersite connections. Plantings are also proposed on the 4th floor as raised planters along the western, northern, and eastern facing decks. DP 473 was presented to the Advisory Design Panel on December 14, 2017, and again on February 1st, 2018. Both times, ADP passed the following resolution: that the Advisory Design Panel generally supports the project as presented and would like the applicant to resolve the following recommendations and return to present the revised project to Advisory Design Panel. Since its second visit to ADP, the project has been reclassified as a priority application and thus does not need to return to Advisory Design Panel as per the policy. Staff have worked with the applicant to resolve some of ADP's recommendations as highlighted in the table above. This includes an additional loading bay located in the driveway and a reduced grade to that loading bay area, a trail and vegetated buffer along the secondary footway with a public access right-of-way. The commercial use has been reduced by 33%, to respond to Advisory Design Panel's comment that the mix of commercial and residential was not appropriate in this area. And the height has been reduced by 1 story to respond to Advisory Design Panel's comment that the massing was too much for the area. One condition of DP issuance is the establishment of a statutory right-of-way for public access along the southern and western property lines. 1.5 meters along the west and 3 meters along the south has been agreed to. This area is highlighted in red above. A similar 1.5 meter right-of-way will be sought on the neighboring property to the west. As for the variances, the first variance requested is for an interior side setback reduction along the eastern lot line to reduce it from 3 meters to 2.55 meters. And this is to accommodate the below-grade parkade. The main building does not intrude into the setback. The second request for variance is to vary the number of required loading bays from 3 to 2. Staff are supportive of this variance. The zoning bylaw does not allow for uses to be combined when calculating loading requirements, so while the total required area would only require 2, because office space is included, it requires an additional loading space. The DP can proceed without this variance. Office space just will not be permitted on the second story. In summary, this proposal generally meets and exceeds DPA 6 form and character guidelines. Highlights include the high quality of building material, extensive landscaping, and the screening of garbage and other necessary features. DP 473 was posted to the district's development showcase. No requests for a public information meeting were received within the 21-day showcase timeframe. No public information meeting was hosted. Variance notices were sent to residents within 100 meters of the property as per legislative requirements, and no comments were received. Staff recommend that council authorize development permit number 473 for the property at 39666 Government Road, subject to the provision of bonding for landscaping, the approval of housing agreement bylaw number 2593/2018, and the registration of the approved housing agreement on title, the registration of a railway noise and vibration covenant on title, The registration of a statutory right-of-way for public access along the east and south property lines. I'm sorry, that should read west and south property lines. Registration of an updated flood covenant on title. And that development permit 473 include variances to the following sections of the District of Squamish zoning bylaw. A variance to the interior side setback from 3 meters to 2.55 meters, and a variance to the off-street loading requirements from 3 off-street loading spaces to 2 off-street loading spaces, and that mayor and the general manager of corporate services be authorized to execute the development permit.
Thank you. Questions from council? Councilor Blackman-Hall from Councilor Strong?
Yeah, a little bit troubling. I'm wondering, how did it come to be that the ADP is deciding on zoning issues as far as reducing the employment space? And I don't know, I mean, I used to be a citizen member of the ADP, and we were always told, like, no, you gotta stick within more design parameters, and maybe talk a little bit about how that evolved, and recognizing, of course, this is a new type of zoning that we're doing, but it just seems like it's kind of going a little bit further than in the past.
And just to clarify, the recommended motion from the ADP does not include a reconsideration of the commercial. There was one comment in the list, but it's not in the motion, the recommended from the ADP.
Yes, I can answer this question. So the ADP made a number of comments about the overall density of the building. Generally, I think there was agreement on DP that this site is too small for what the building is trying to achieve. So it wasn't really related directly to just the commercial, but it was the overall density. And so what happened was, after that meeting, the applicants decided that they were going to take off one of the stories of the residential space. So the building decreased, and there was a variance proposed for the height to allow for that additional story and some articulation. But the applicants decided to take out, I believe, 6 units, and that ratio then affects the commercial space as well. So minus 6 units, and then the commercial space also shrinks because it's directly tied in the zone. So the more residential you do, the more commercial you have to do. So it wasn't directly related
So it was
to...
a formula that resulted in 33% reduction in commercial?
Yes.
Just going a little bit further on that then. I mean, the DPA guidelines for this area, are they only for the business park?
Yes, they are.
Okay. Because in my view, and just my opinion, but I would suspect given the existing context and what's there, I mean, even the initial proposal is like way nicer than anything we have in the business park, so.
Hold your comments, we're
Okay.
just getting
Sorry.
questions for clarification purposes. Councillor Chappelle?
Thanks.
Councillor Elliott-Sandell?
The reduction of commercial, can you go back to the ADP recommendations again? Commercial use has been reduced by 33%. So this entire building is confusing to me as well. I don't know how people get in and out of the commercial with the flood construction zone. I don't know about the loading bays. How are people going to load in this? Intention of the mud zone was so that we had some mixed commercial use that wasn't going to be basically commercial, that was going to be office use mixed with heavier, not light industrial use. And when I look at this, it looks like basically a residential building with some commercial in it, but not very functional commercial. Reducing a loading bay, I don't mind that, but why would adding a loading bay reduce the commercial on the second floor?
And just to clarify, this technically meets the zoning. There are a few variances requested, so it's a DP in front of council, so it has parameters by which it can make its decision, just to frame it. And then variances, of course, are at the total discretion of council. I just wanted to frame it, so.
May I make a comment about that? Like, I totally see your point, but this is our first mud building.
Totally agree that we need to look at this. I'm just, it's not a rezoning.
No.
So as long as it meets the formula under the zoning.
Exactly, I'm just curious about the loading bay, that is a variance,
Absolutely,
and that's what I'm asking about.
Yeah, absolutely.
Through you, Mayor, so to address the commercial formula, so MUD 1 is divided into 3 zones. Area 3 is more of a neighborhood commercial permitting zone. So that's like what has been proposed here for the first story, and office is permitted on the second story only. In order to achieve residential density, applicants need to meet a certain target of commercial to achieve an equivalent target of residential, which is why the first story is entirely commercial. To meet the flood construction level, the parkade has raised the first story to 7-ish meters. So the parking is undergrounded on the first level of parking and partially undergrounded on the second level, which raises the commercial to a level where it can be sort of at grade. The loading bay requirements, I believe what they're proposing in terms of total commercial is less than 2,000 square meters, but 2,000 square meters, and how the loading bylaw is, off-street loading bylaw is written, it would require only 2 loading bays if it was all considered the same use for up to 2,500 square meters of commercial space, but because office is considered outside of that, they're then required to have a 3rd space, which staff don't feel is necessary.
Okay, fair enough. How about loading into with the shape of the building and the extensive massing of it, how do you load into the commercial spaces with the flood? And did I hear you right, 7 meters of flood construction in this area?
It's above.
It's 7 geodetic meters, so it's from sea level, not from the national grid.
Thank you.
So this is a sort of a site plan, and the loading bays. The loading bays come through here, and the parking.
Right through the pedestrian area?
No, the pedestrian plaza is up here, so it's raised, and the loading bays are at the rear here, and the entry into the parking is along underneath here, so it's sunken. So there are ramping stairs that come to the front of the building up this way, and then this plaza is raised to the same level as the commercial spaces.
Sorry, the trucks pull in there, they go underground to the loading bays, and then how do they get up? How do you load into the commercial spaces?
The loading trucks park here, and then there's an entryway through here to an elevator that goes up into the building. So they go through the parkade, I believe.
Is that
or they can come to the front of
residences too? Is there one elevator for commercial and residential loading?
Yes.
Yeah.
I've never seen that in my life before. That seems really inconvenient.
That is dictated by the building code, so the zoning bylaw doesn't get into, or it can get into, prescribing the number of elevators you need.
And so the ground floor commercial, where does that load?
Ground floor commercial, again, 3-Mary would load either through the underground parking to the elevator, or they could utilize the ramping stairs.
And then out through the front, like you come to the elevator, you go underground into the elevator, out onto the pedestrian access, and into the front of your store?
I believe that is correct, yes.
That is very inconvenient, to say the least. Can you imagine deliveries being loaded and people using the elevator while commercials being loaded?
Let's try to keep it to questions. We'll have lots of time for comments.
That was the question. Can you imagine?
That was a good try. But I like your creativity. Good job. Any other questions? Councillor Elliott.
So I look at the building plans, and there's lots of details for the residential, but the floor plan for the commercial is just a big empty space. I'm wondering if you can explain why that hasn't been articulated further.
Unless you have a good explanation. I can address that question. So again, this is a development permit, and at development permit stage, what we deal with is the form and character. And our zoning bylaw doesn't prescribe in the MUD zone how many partitions you have to have, or how many commercial units you have to have. It's just floor space. So I believe the building could be partitioned if that's what the owners or the occupants desired. So it's just not the focus of the development permit. It's not a requirement to have multiple commercial spaces or any number of. it could be a completely open area.
Can you explain why we haven't animated the west side or the rear? So I think the mud zone anticipated this sort of kind of industrial community feel from the heavy industrial in zone 1 all the way up to a more softer treatment to help the neighbors to the north where it's all residential. But I was imagining buildings that were animated to not just face the street, but to also interact with what eventually would be built around them. So I'm trying to understand how this particular design does that.
So the design animates the building on two sides, on the street and on the side. And that's where, this is one of the smaller lots in the MUD 1 area. So the trade-off is the commercial space, the building footprint, and then and the outdoor spaces. But it does meet the outdoor space requirements. It does animate it on two ends, and it provides a connection over to the site that's to the west, as well as to the south. But again, there's no requirement in the deep area guidelines to have that animation. It meets, the building meets the setbacks to the western side where there is less animation. But I think the focus of the building is on two sides rather than on four. And that's typical.
Well, can I follow up?
Yeah.
So I kind of question that because the mud zone isn't typical in Squamish, it's new. And the whole premise of that was to try and bring forward some creative solutions that would blend light industrial. And to me, the mud zone is about protecting employment first and foremost and softening that employment as it moves north by putting a little bit of allowable residential. And so to me, I know these are small lots, but they're part of a mud zone. It's a very distinct zone, which was anticipating how all these buildings would eventually interact. So I'm actually a bit concerned that it only anticipates two sides, not its third and fourth sides, because it's a wall. Like, and even the rear, there's not even a door contemplated. I just don't, anyway, I just don't understand how it interacts with the whole MUD 1 zone. I understand how it interacts with Government Road. Yes?
I believe when we went for the MUD rezoning, it was a bit of an experiment. And rather than prescribing how these lots are going to interact, we left it fairly open and flexible. There were certain incentives for the properties to work together. So one of them was, you could build across property lines and then share an access point. But this was a bit of an experiment. And it's really hard to imagine how this building is going to interact until you have other buildings going around. It's kind of like the first building and the most dense building in the most dense area in the mud zone. So the point that I'm trying to make is that there's no requirement for it to interact, although it does provide pedestrian connectivity to all three sides and the trail connectivity.
3 sides or 2 sides?
Well, 3 sides, and then there's frontage on Government Road. So there's a trail in the back, there's a pedestrian plaza to the east, and there's a trail on the west side of the property.
Can I ask one more question? Does not the current loading zone situation limit the potential commercial that could go there because it's inconvenient if you have large equipment or need to move goods? You either have to go up a whole bunch of ramps or you're getting in a tiny elevator that you're sharing with residents. Like, this whole zone was about enabling unique and creative ways to blend housing and employment. And we've created like this maze we're making it hard for commercial to exist there. And I want this whole zone to make it easy for light industrial and commercial operators to be there. And this design looks challenging to me for that to happen.
Yeah, I think one of the things that does have an impact on this side is the flood construction level. And the fact that the commercial has to be, you know, it is able to accommodate 2 levels of parkade before you get to the top of the flood construction level. So on the smaller site like this, getting the parkade up would probably come at a cost to the public plaza or the building, the footprint of the building. It would probably be possible to ramp it up. I don't know, just if you could put up the picture that shows government. There you go. It could probably be possible to ramp it up, but then the trade-off is the loss of that green space that will be available to pedestrians. So yeah, it's a challenge.
Councillor Pryor.
Well, I'm going to save a lot of mine for comments, but just in the report, it says after ADP, final submission, and before ADP, original submission. We should at least have the same picture.
It was changed.
It was changed.
The whole story was
I know, but one is one angle and one is a different angle. It's not the same angle. It's just one of those, you know. I know that's simple, and I know now that most of the bigger
Close
projects.
to the same angle. It's a little bit off, but it's the same general angle. Is it not? Am I reading that incorrectly?
Same general angle, yes, same general angle.
Like one's at, but it's the same corner.
Well, it's just a totally different shot. Anyway, I'm just saying that, you know, we've been influenced by architect renditions, so much so that we've changed the rules and now we require 360s, remember, just recently, to avoid, and I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but what it says after the final submission, it looks fabulous before the final, but really, it's a major angle change. And I'm just arguing a point, okay? It doesn't matter for this, but it's just really arguing a point that when you're trying to prove something, show the same exact spot where you're shooting it from.
Councillor Kent.
Thanks, and to the point that Councillor Elliott makes about the idea of the homogeny here, and we had talked about having industrial in the lower portions of the lots. And this may be slightly off topic, but I'm just wondering how many other open DPs or active DPs do we have on those other lots in that particular mud zone? And and I know that I'm not trying to steer us down a rabbit hole, but just to ask, because of the character of this particular building, what then are we looking at for some of the characters of these other lots in order to make that mud zone work? Because we had a sort of a vision for it when we did lay it out there. So I'm just curious as to what that homogeny is going to look like based on what we're seeing here for the first piece of it.
Jesse, maybe you can speak to the other applications, but we do have.
I don't need them in great length or depth, just to sort of see how this piece will fit into what other proposals might be coming forward.
Through you, Mayor, we have one other application that we've received so far in the Mud 1 zone, also for a building within Area 3. In working with the applicant, we've been seeking to connect the sites through pathways so that our focus has been on interpedestrian connectivity. The other site will have a similar mix of commercial and residential, and as applications come in for area 2 and 3, we'll see more of the light industrial manufacturing uses.
We have seen some examples, and we know people are getting ready to make an application. And there's certainly going to be more light industrial focused buildings, especially on the south side.
I believe in keeping true to the form that we originally put forth when we had the dialogue for this whole design. Just keep it at that for the moment.
A few questions. Was it considered to have plaza on all 4 sides of this building?
I don't believe at any time plaza was considered on all 4 sides. Originally, the original submission along the western property line was raised. However, because it is a secondary floodway, they then had to lower it down to natural grade to allow for floodwaters to flow through.
Yeah, and I think because this is the first one, you know, I never envisioned the loading docks coming off of the government road side. Certainly was more internal that I was envisioning those loading docks and not so much facing the residential neighborhood. So I have a bit of a concern. I realize this is the first one, and so until the other ones sort of get strategized, it's hard to do, but that is a concern of mine, having those loading docks coming off of government road. I've got Councillor Spill and Councillor Elliott.
Yeah, I think that that is exactly my concern. I echo Councillor Elliott's concerns about the employment. This was supposed to be connected to our employment area, and it was supposed to be an employment area. It's taking up economic development land, and it is a great rental project. I don't mind the look of it. I just want the workspace to be functional, that's all. I think they can achieve that. I don't even mind the massing as much, because I do think it has a nice integrated design, but really having nice pedestrian pathways, but giving up your workspace for a pedestrian space. I'd look to a park or it's got to be designed better. I just don't see this as a first mud project. It's just another, it looks like a C4 zoning. That's what it looks like, not a mud zoning.
Let's stick to questions and not comments at this point. Councillor Elliott and Councillor Carr.
Can I just ask, like, in a future scenario, when the OCP is passed and we have the universal guidelines, they would apply here, not DP Area 6?
Yes, it would.
Because DP Area 6 doesn't really speak to this mix of residential. Like, it's a very narrow guideline. It really just sounds like it addresses the business side of the business part.
Yes, when we went through the MUD 1 zoning, it was somewhat of a quick process, because what we were looking at is duplexes on some of these properties. So we didn't have time to make sure that we amend the OCP at the same time to bring in the guidelines. But we think from a guideline, from a mixed use perspective, it's generally a good looking building. Our OCP guidelines will be more stringent when it comes to activation of space, not so much to making sure that the employment space works.
Yeah, follow up on that, Councillor Carr.
Because this mud zone tries to encourage people to work together, is there a way to create access through the back for loading the back of the through other lots? Or are there roadways designated in the mud zone, or?
No, because there's no roadway. I mean, it's all private property once you get off government road. So there's no opportunity really, unless a property owner gave a right of way to the district, or it would have to be to the district to access some of these sites from another lot. The only access point this lot has is government road.
But the original intent of the mud zone was to provide access eventually north to south as things build up, is that? And through, like, we wouldn't just be, because the zones go like this.
Yes.
And the lots are going north south.
So we built in an incentive for people to share accesses, and that was by allowing people to build the property line, so that you could have, have a couple of property owners build the property line and then share one access point. But that's just an incentive. Again, we kept it fairly flexible.
Councillor Pryor, and then I would like to give the public an opportunity to speak to the variances.
Yeah, thanks. I sat through ADP with everybody on this one. I'm pleased to say that Council's asking a lot of the questions that the ADP asked, so particularly Karen. I think that's great. You're doing a great job. It did evolve, and in that conversation, a lot of the emphasis went to the fact that it's the first building going in there. We don't know what's going to go around it. But it went to the purpose-built rentals as some key thing that we really want, and that's actually why this one's come to us up front real quick, because it's 100% rentals. And in the mud zone, that's something that we want. So, I had a lot of, a lot of issues with it myself, but as I listened to the ADP discuss it, the discussion evolved to support. And that's all I can say about the ADP meeting there. And I don't want to personally talk about the faults I saw with it because, I'm reading the ADP report. The commercial is a tough one on that lot. And I know when we created the mud zone for up there, we all had our own little kind of visions on how we'd see it go. But really, it's taken off on us, that zone now. There's another one. I sat in ADP and watched another one, which the ADP liked, and it's going to come to us soon, and now they're working on another one. There's only going to be 2 little lots left, and the rest are all done, or they're all planned. So we wanted something to happen up there, something happened up there. And so, all I can say is by the end of the conversation, the ADP supported it, as you can see by the report, and there was a lot of questions.
There's one other small lot, it looks like 39668 Government Road. Will it require a double loading lane like this as well?
Likely, I believe at this point there have been some indication that they may share the loading bay. However, we have no assurance of that moving forward.
There may be an acquisition in the future that is possible, that I believe the applicants have explored of the property next door. So that would make it possible to share it if it was under the same ownership.
But they'd still require a certain amount of loading bays per square footage, so they might require a third one.
Absolutely,
Or
yes.
a fourth one, depending
Yeah.
on. This one requires 3, and it's asking for a variance for 2.
Yeah, so only to make the office space possible. Otherwise, all of the space could be used as commercial space with 2 loading bays.
Oh, that's right. Councilor Pryor?
Yeah, thanks. I'm being on Government Road there, I'll just keep my mouth shut, but there's actually no parking in front of this building.
It's questions.
So
We'll
the
get lots of
future-
time to.
The building to the north of this, because it's so close to the intersection, will they actually get an entrance right that close, a loading bay that close to the intersection?
You're talking west of this?
Yeah.
West of this, the property by the rail.
No, the other way. East. Near the intersection.
Oh, to the east.
Yeah. Sorry, the east of it.
Oh, near the Government Road,
Yeah.
Buckley, Queensway intersection.
I know when we did the mud zone, I know council, I think council really did envision what I did too, which was like a big center thing going on in the center and everybody connecting and it being a really cool zone. And then everyone go, oh, here's the rules, bam, the things just have come in right now to the point that it's just about filled up. And all the landowners didn't necessarily get together and fulfill our vision, so.
Maybe we should.
I'm just saying.
Thank you, there was no question there. I'm going to go to the public to see if there's anyone who'd like to speak to the variances. Yeah, come up, state your name and your address, and if you represent yourself, a business or an organization.
Well, good evening. My name is Renee Olson. I reside at 401 1400 Lindburn Place in Victoria, and I am a project manager and representative of West Urban Developments. So thank you very much, Jesse and Jonas, for all of your diligence and hard work in supporting us as we work through this process. And I just wanted to come up tonight and just say how really invested we are in Squamish, and that we're happy to be here and working with the municipality. Certainly, Jonas and Jesse have outlined that we've met all the requirements and that we are offering a diversity of housing as well as affordable. Now, slightly anecdotal, I will say that whenever I have been involved in a development project, and my career spans over 15 years, I do walk the community that I'm in. And I've spent some time getting to know some of the folks that reside in Squamish. And certainly, it's no surprise to anyone here as an elected representative that there is you obviously have a housing issue here in Squamish. And the exciting thing is that it's growing. And so there's a vibrancy that's coming with that growth. We really see this opportunity as adding value to the vibrancy that's coming into Squamish. And I'll just touch on that quickly because I know there's some concern regarding the commercial component. Sean Roy, who's the CEO of West Urban Developments, has more than 15 years experience in dense residential and commercial, as do I. And so we take that very seriously, and we do a lot of market research when we go into a community. And one of the things that I've kind of noticed about Squamish that I think is interesting is that it has a little bit of that Portland feel to it. And there's a youth and a vibrancy that's coming into this municipality. And so with that, you have different businesses that are coming that aren't typically traditional, that aren't typical commercial space. And we have these great warehouse doors that we have on this building that can be opened up in the summertime to even create more vibrancy. And some of the multiplier effect that comes from that, and that comes from design, and comes from attracting the folks that are going to be living in the residential portion of the building will also be working there. And so we've seen that happening in other communities throughout North America. And we are invested in Squamish because we think that there is that potential, and that this particular area has that potential as well. So I just wanted to speak to that and say how very pleased we are to be here, and that we are looking to connect for sure with the other buildings that are in this particular area. We have the adjacent property is under contract, so we are invested in it, and we are invested in the idea of connecting it and making sure that there's that connectability and functionality that you're all raising as a concern. And also to make sure that I've had a couple of conversations about pollinators as well, to make sure that we keep that as a focus, that we're being responsible and thoughtful in our overall development. And I thank you so much for your time and your consideration and your thoughtfulness as you're planning the wonderful community that's Squamish. Thank you.
Thank you. And as you can see, you're a bit of our guinea pig here because you're the first one to the gate. So is there anyone else who would like to speak to the variances of this development permit? I don't see any. Council, any more questions? Councillor Elliott.
Does the lot to the west have their development permit in?
Correct, yes. They have applied for development permit to the west.
Theoretically, conversations could happen to share a loading zone and put the loading zone on that side of the building and have one entrance for both buildings.
Through you, Mayor, because of the secondary floodway, a loading bay was proposed on the east side of the Western Properties building. However, there can't be any fill within the secondary floodway that joins those property lines. And then that would require them to have two entrances off of Government Road. So it wasn't pursued. It wasn't deemed as feasible.
So the floodway has to be between these two buildings?
The secondary floodway has been mapped as between these two buildings and on the western side of the western property, through the entire western property.
It would be helpful to have that map.
That is, one of the things I was gonna say is, one thing that we didn't foresee was that floodway that ran between the two properties. We knew of the floodway on the side of the railroad, and that's why we set the 15-meter setback on that property. But we didn't foresee the floodway being between the two properties, and that has recently come up with the new floodplain bylaw. So that is one of the, that's definitely impacted the design of this building, and the lot next door as well.
But we built right out to the lot line on that side.
Correct. The building is proposed to build up to the setback of that side.
Right, 2.55 on that side.
3 meters on the west side,
So,
which is the
okay.
setback. Secondary floodway provisions are that you can build up to your setback, but you cannot place any fill greater than a 5-to-1 rise within the secondary floodway.
To make it perfectly clear. Dr. Schwab.
With the floodways, can you build commercial is it the same sort of commercial leniencies with floodways? Or is it, everything has to be under the floodway? It's downtown only.
It's downtown only, it doesn't have that exemption, although the floodplain bylaw does allow for exemption, and we are going to be looking at that with some of the other applications, the more industrial applications.
Which are further, the other two properties are going to be more industrial applications?
The property is south, so closer to, is it Pioneer Way?
Pioneer Way.
Yes.
Can I ask another?
Yeah, go ahead.
So the loading requirements, one elevator for commercial, and you were saying, can you speak a little bit more? It's provincial bylaws allow for commercial and residential. Just maybe the proponent can speak to this. I'm just not sure what happens on a loading day when you have all your commercial loading in at once. You have one elevator and 2 loading bays, and people have to get their work goods, their storefront items through they have to load everything up through a small elevator and then go through a pedestrian pathway into the front of their store, through their customers, how was that thought out or envisioned? Could you have not put the loading bay to go right through so they could load right into their stores? If there's these beautiful bays, you could have it be a flat loading spot and a lower down loading bay where a truck could pull in. And actually, I don't envision this area as having a beautiful area to sit. It's right by a railway. You're going to be sitting and listening to trains shunting. So this is an employment area. This takes up employment land, and it's going to be lower income housing because of the fact that a train's going to be shunting in the backyard. So how did the design get so far into residential in C4 that it isn't mud anymore?
I think one of the challenges is that this is the most neighborhood commercial-like area in the mud zone. So I think it's reasonable to
expect. There is the interaction between the corner there?
Well,
the residences across the street?
Yes, well, I mean, what I'm trying to say is the neighborhood commercial uses will allow for really neighborhood commercial type of businesses rather than industrial. So I think it's reasonable to expect that you could have a brewery type restaurant, or I believe a restaurant, it would be allowed, so that public space is important. I think if we try and ramp up the loading bay to that level, it would take away, I'm now speaking on behalf of the project, but it would take away from the activation. It might impact parking, and as you know, parking does drive the commercial as well as the residential densities. And a lot of the site is built with underground parking. So underneath the plaza space, it's parking.
So, Councillor Pryor said something that confused me a little bit. He said that ADP approved it, but ADP asked for it to come back.
Yes.
The only reason it didn't is because it got made 100% rental. But ADP said we still want it to come back. That's different. Because usually they pass a motion that says, there's a few things, but we're generally good. We don't need to see it again. But ADP actually said, we want to see this one again. Then it became 100% rental, and then ADP didn't get to see it again. So they didn't necessarily prove it.
No, it was not, it was going to be, ADP wanted to see it come back. I think it went through some significant changes since when the ADP
Really?
saw it, and because it became a rental building, obviously we followed the policy. But yes, ADP did want to see it come back.
And then just this floodway thing. So water has to pass between the buildings, but can something connect the buildings at an upper level?
We have explored the idea of putting, a pedestrian pathway over it. I don't know where that led.
My understanding is the podiums are at different heights, and the applicant, one of the applicants was not willing to pursue that.
It's not
Talk
a
about
rezoning.
activated space, because you could have a whole plaza between these buildings with a floodway that goes underneath them, and potentially a way to service commercial on all sides of the building, not just one. That's a shame. And who cares if they're at different heights? You can terrace it. But I mean, this is the kind of creativity that I was looking for in Med 1. And when I look at some of the commercial uses in there, it's not functional.
We'll get to opinion and comments in a second. Councillor Pryor, question?
I don't know, I think I'm hand up. It'll be comments.
One more time, we'll go out to the public to see if there's any comments on the variances. Don't see any. Council, I think we've had an opportunity to answer all our questions. I think our questions have led to more questions. Maybe I'll just take a little crack at this. I generally like it. I think it meets the intention of the uses that the north part of the mud zone was going after. I don't think we should be having loading off of Government Road. I think the conversation that happened in this room about the mud zone was that we created more of an internal system that moved the loading into that internal system. I think this was an area we always expected some coordination or cooperation between all the landowners. So that was a bit of the condition of rezoning it. We initiated this rezoning. Otherwise, it would be still mostly industrial and some other residential, but it would be a mishmash. Really pleased that it's 100% rental as proposed. I suspect if we reject the DP, it might not come back as 100% rental, but certainly I think that's something in its favor. Generally like the design. It's I think especially if the architecture or the vernacular is kind of a little industrial, a little edgy, I think that'll be great. It's hard to tell in diagrams how it's going to manifest. I'm assuming, it doesn't clearly articulate, but I'm assuming all the garbage collection is all inside the parkade. So it's all covered, that's good. But I have a real trouble with the loading docks off of there, and also not being able to, I'm not sure how you're gonna carve up these commercial spaces down below, because you only can get at them unless, I guess, an internal hallway system, but then you don't have windows on those sides either. So I'm a little confused why we wouldn't want to have some sort of access on all sides to some sort of courtyard system. We are challenged. I appreciate the fact that we're challenged with the flood channels. I hope the proponent realizes that you are our guinea pig here, and we may have a few fits and starts on these properties to get it right. Those are my thoughts for now. Councilor Chanel.
Thanks. I think this should have been put downtown. I think it's a perfect rental project. It's a beautiful building. and it fits the C4 zone perfectly. I don't think there's anything innovative about it. I don't think there's any mud. We exactly took away our employment land here. And getting rental can be done downtown. There's nothing special about the integration between our industrial or light industrial area and our business park that is becoming a neglected zone, and a zone like Portland, as the proponent said, but we lack the employment density. I like the second floor employment space, but the ground floor employment space is basically, I would never put a business in there. I have multiple businesses, and I would never agree to loading my anything in a residential elevator and be waiting for residences and then forcing loads of stuff on a dolly across the front and into the front of it's highly non-functional. So this has to be functional employment land for me to even remotely say okay to it. It's not right now. I don't mind the variance as far as the loading bay, and other than that, I don't, it's irrelevant to me, the other variances, because the building isn't functioning as it should for this zone. Having a building like this on any lot downtown, you wouldn't even think twice about it, because you have more commercial real estate, commercial service industry type jobs in the downtown, where you maybe a lot of coffee shops and integrations. I'm not looking for that sort of coffee shop integration. I want employment space for light industry in my community, and these are taking away light industry and industrial land. We put MUDs there so we could add density on top, not to take away employment lands. And for me, this takes away employment lands, although it adds second floor office space. I'm not sure what the intention of the ground floor. And if the building was reconfigured a bit, so it had a back corridor that you could load into the back of the commercial spaces and stay away from that pedestrian, you don't want pedestrians sitting there and a constant flow of dollies with consumer goods going past them, or machine tools, or whatever you're going to put in that area. It doesn't make for a pleasant seating spot to have commercial stuff being loaded in an elevator. It's just, I think it's just bad design. I think it could have been done better, albeit not more cheaply, to have a center courtyard where you could load in stuff into the back of the commercial spaces. So, and I definitely don't mind the residential. I don't mind the rentals. I think that's a fantastic idea. I just think that there needs to be a better integration of employment lands throughout all of these MUD zones.
Councillor Blankenwolf.
I think this is a great project. I mean, I think it hits a lot of the things that we actually set out to do, which was to prevent it from people from seeking a rezoning and putting up townhouses or something that really didn't fit the area, but also not having some very heavy industrial or typical slap up a warehouse type thing and have that directly interface with the adjacent residences. So to me, this gives something that's unique on the market, and I'm sure that the applicants have done their due diligence in terms of, I don't think they would be building space if they weren't confident that they could get tenants for their commercial spaces. And I'm not worried about the configuration. I think that you actually want a blank canvas at the beginning, and then it gets parceled out, and it probably will change over the years too, right? So that's what's unique about this project. The loading bay, it would be better if it was in the back, but I also would note that because this is to the west of the intersection, it actually doesn't really interfere, intersection of Queensway and Government, it doesn't interfere with our major bike and pedestrian corridor. It's off to the side a little bit, so I don't think it's going to be a heavily pedestrian area, but having that plaza up front and having it in this area here, you could have some interesting uses, because there is train shunting, so maybe that's actually a better place for a patio where folks can be listening to music a little bit later into the evening or something like that. I don't know, but to me, I really like the front plaza, and I like that it's actually raised in this area, because you're up a little bit above all of the traffic, and you got some, I'm sure you'll have some decent views in some ways, but yeah, I mean, we have to be careful, I think, not to try and expect too much from one piece of property. And like I said earlier, like, this is like way above what the standard is right now in the business park, and things that we've approved previously that had way less architectural features. And yeah, I think we should just jump on it. And you know, if we don't jump in, we may never get to see that. And you know, again, too, having some rental immediately, getting that constructed, that's a huge thing. You know, 40 units, you know, assuming a couple people per unit, that's 80 people that could have new ones. And I don't often put those things together, but we also don't often get purpose-built rental in an entire building. So I'm willing to go out on a bit of a limb here and tie the two together. But I think you know, given what we put forward, I'm actually quite impressed, and so I'd ask my colleagues to consider supporting this.
Yeah, we actually don't have a motion on the floor. I wonder if Councillor
I'll move the motion,
Move the
yeah.
motion. Is there a second by Councillor Pryor? I just want to go around the room before I come back to Councillor Chappelle. Anyone else want to speak to this at this point? Councillor Pryor?
Yeah, thanks. I'm just to Karen's comments about the ADP. Maybe I chose my words wrong. The flavor of the meeting by the end of the ADP meeting was that the ADP supported it. Yes, a lot of time, you know, the conversations were take a story off, which happened, you know, but the conversation started off more negative and ended up more positive. Anyway, the mud zone, whether it's a success when you see it being filled up as fast as it's coming, well, I guess I have the advantage because I'm on the ADP, so I see the next project that's coming that's also 100% purpose-built rentals, and so it gets to go through this hyped-up process, come through it very fast, which we wrote. When we wrote that process, we were the ones that did the mud zone. So it was kind of like that small lot development tonight that, you know, really, I should have supported that because I supported that you know.
Let's not go backwards.
Okay, anyway, so I'm hoping that, you know, Jonas and the planning department do have control a little bit over some of the stuff that's happening around this lot. And I know we discussed the mud zone and it was brought to council that, man, we better get in there and revisit that, which we haven't had time to do. I mean, and it's pretty much done. I think there's one lot left that's not being looked at. So we didn't hit that. So, I mean, I'm with Jason. I mean, we create a zone. It's going to have a lot of houses up there, a lot of people. So that commercial area, it just, you know, Sue, you're always talking about, where's the big commercial space? Well, there's one right there. One big commercial space.
Just speak.
How big are the commercial?
Speak
And
to
through
the
the
chair,
chair.
please.
Yeah. And so,
Councillor Elliott.
No, I think that the vision for MUD was always about preserving employment lands first and allowing for some residential. And I know in downtown South, we sent a few DPs back to staff because they weren't quite right. They weren't hitting the mix of residential and functional commercial that we were looking for. And I know that that's not the easiest pathway for developers, but I don't think we can sacrifice functional commercial for purpose-built rental. And I know there's more purpose-built rental coming, and I think that our incentive plan will keep that coming. But there's something about this commercial space and those two big blank walls and the way that the loading is anticipated that doesn't meet the bar for me. And I think it can. I think there's so many good things about this property that I like. And I don't mind the variances that they're asking for. But the functionality of it on employment land is not working for me right now. And I think with another effort, it could. But I also think we have to really ask these applicants, all of them that are looking at the mud zone, to reach across property lines, or we won't get what we want. And I think we have to hold true to that, or we'll end up with 5 totally separate and unconnected pieces of light industrial property.
Councilor Kent, do you want to speak to it?
Well, to Jason's point, I can support this, but also to Karen's point, to her final point there, I really think and I really hope that these developers that are coming in here can reach across and get a common vision and have your guidance in that, and our guidance and the vision that we put forth in the first place as to how we wanted to see this layout. I don't mind this first step in here, and I think it's kind of the first toe in the water in the mud zone. But what follows this is what concerns me, and how it lays out in accordance to the vision that we put up in the first place. And I think that's up to staff to guide and to help the developers reach across and make that happen. So I can support it.
Councilor Strong.
How big are the commercial spaces?
Or what's the minimum size? Because they can be a whole
are
floor
they-
theoretically.
There is no minimum size to the commercial spaces.
So they're all just an open space that can be blocked out depending on the lot. Okay, and the second floor office space is how many square feet?
It can be as big or as small as somebody needs it to be.
Awesome.
There is no minimum size to the commercial, to each commercial unit. The commercial space provided on the second story is about just over 300 square meters, I believe.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Can you outline,
Can I finish?
yeah, I just want to clarify your point.
Yep.
Can you outline square footage or square meters of the commercial and square meters of the office?
Yes, just one moment.
Is that okay, Councilor Strong? Either way, it meets the zone technically, but just to get you a number there.
Absolutely. Yeah, it really isn't the, it's more so the functionality of it. And I'm looking at it and I just don't see why it couldn't have gone to have a ground floor, the truck can load onto the same floor of the commercial without using the residential elevator. Like having some delineation between the residential elevator and the commercial would be a fantastic, a fantastic first bit of remediation to the functionality of the commercial, and it doesn't seem unreasonable to ask for that there be a separation. It just seems to create. I've made that point already, but I'm looking at the design and I'm thinking taking out a hedge and making a ramp for loading in the front would not be a bad thing. Like take a little bit of green space along the stairs and make it so that trucks could pull up and directly load into the commercial spaces. When I'm looking at the design, page 58, there's a brick wall in the front and some hedges and everything else, and the parking garage goes down there. If there was a loading bay in the front there even, that allowed people to load right into the commercial spaces, it would, and then even for the second floor, you'd still have to go through the elevator. But I don't disagree with Councillor Blackburn-Wolf in the fact that it's a nice looking project. I don't mind this here. I'm thankful that staff actually got a really nice design and took this to the ADP. Maybe with the other projects, these comments can be actually looked at as far as having functional ground floor light industrial that's going to be functional for people to be operating in. I don't mind the design of the upper top bits, but even having a loading elevator, is there any way, there's no space in the building to have a loading elevator, maybe the proponent can, like a separate commercial and loading elevator for the commercial / residential?
Technically, I don't think it's something
They
we
don't
have the
have to.
ability to
It's provincial.
enforce or.
It's a building code issue where the local government or legislation in BC doesn't allow us to pre-zone for building features.
Okay, so I recognize that we're here looking at variances, and I'm hoping that staff hear our comments and don't put C4 on industrial land.
If I may, I just want to address.
I'm just
Technically
saying,
not correct, Councillor Schwab.
technically,
Linda?
building.
If I can just clarify, it's important as well that as much as staff work with proponents and provide them advice, it's based on the policy that exists in the zone. So staff doesn't have any personal or professional even opinion influence. What they bring you is based on the DP policy that exists as opposed
Totally
to.
recognize that, which is why I will support the amendments. But I'm hoping that our future, that we get, in the future, that we get more employment space out of our industrial land.
Councillor Elliott.
You know, I think this building offers lots of commercial space, but I don't think it's done in a smart way. And we have examples in the business park where commercial wasn't built very well. And you've got narrow throughways and bad parking where people can't load what they want to load. And then we can't fix it. Once it's built, it's not functional for business. It limits the number of businesses that can move in. And what we're trying to do with MUD is create lots of opportunity. And lots of creative opportunity for business, both on the first floor and the second floor, and by providing a mix through the whole zone. And so if we're not careful about functionality right at the beginning, we're gonna end up with like that building that Counterpart Coffee is in, and where that, you know, that skinny driveway, and no one can load anything of size into that because you can't turn a big truck around in there. And it limits what businesses can move in. I just think I can't support it because I kick myself later for doing that. I think we need to think commercial first and housing second in the MUD zone.
If it's okay with council, I wouldn't mind taking a 5-minute recess. I need to collect my thoughts a little bit. That's all right? 5-minute recess? All right, thank you. We're back in our development permit number 473. There's a motion on the floor. I'm looking for council to make any final comments. Council's done. Council Pryor?
So, we're at second reading on this? Is that what it is?
This is not, this is DP. This is a development permit.
There's no reading.
There's no reading.
So, if we were to say, fix the loading bays, bring it back in, would that be something?
Yes?
I don't know if fixing the load base is an easy solution. It might affect the design of the building. So I'm not sure what the impact of that would be.
Just want to read staff's recommendation.
Council Pryor, are you done?
Yeah, I just was wanting to read staff's recommendation up there.
Staff recommendation is to approve the DP
Yeah.
and with 2 suggested variances. Yeah, this is a tough one. But I think I am going to support it. I think there will be challenges with that commercial level. But I generally like the project. And it does meet our DP guidelines, so there's not technically a lot to say no to on the actual DP measurements. The variances themselves, I think are supportable in and of themselves. And I always get frustrated with DPs because your ability to make decisions is limited on how good our development permit guidelines are. And our DP6 guidelines were never meant to guide a MUD zone. They're meant to guide, there's basically nothing in it. Do some nice landscaping, that's about it. And so it's frustrating that we don't have the DP guidelines that are really driving the character, the vernacular of this particular zone yet. But because this is the first one, I think it generally is meeting the intention of what I suspect the DP guidelines would be. But I must say, if any of the other ones come in, I'm almost at the point where I feel like we should put the brakes on them and get new DP area guidelines in on this area. Because if we get 5 or 6 of these types of developments going in here, it's going to be a total, can't say the word in public, it's a 4-letter word, with show at the end of it. But, so I am concerned that we're going to get these sort of piecemeal approach to this, and our DP area guidelines are not going to guide it to where we need this particular segment of the community to go. But I do think there's a lot of merit to this particular project. It's got some challenges, and I suspect they'll realize them, and hopefully we can mitigate those issues in the final building design. But at this point, I think I have to support it. Councillor Spell.
I feel generally the same way. I recognize that staff has to work within legislative guidelines and that this meets all of those legislative guidelines. It's disappointing to me the province allows for really weak integration of residential and commercial that may work in dense areas but not so much in rural areas and in more rural areas. And for me, I'm more disappointed, you know, like we talk about more applications, we're talking about 2 applications. We don't have land to be able to experiment. We have to get things right. And it's disappointing to me that we're losing the possibility of more light industrial or better functional, but you know, I can envision how this can work. So I like the design of it, I like the rental aspect of it. The commercials, everything meets our guidelines and the variances aren't bad. But I worry, as I always do, for the future of our employment lands, because I'm looking at a few units going, oh, that'll last us 100 years, and we have 2 more pieces of property left. So we really do have to start thinking about our commercial space, and I hope the proponent appreciates that it's not going to be Portland without employment. So it's you know, I'm supporting it, but hesitantly and hoping that there can be some sort of resolution to the loading situation, and definitely accessibility with the, I just, you know, imagining rolling the beer cases across the staircase and falling down the stairs. So.
Okay, I don't see any more hands. I'm going to call the question.
I was going to say something, but yeah, we created this mud zone, and we've known for a little while that potentially it was getting out of hand. Okay, we created it, and I've seen other things that we've done where we've not necessarily been 100% on it, and I'm hoping that as this goes through the process, that the opponent can talk to the adjoining property owners, who I think have a development permit in, or working on their development permit. And maybe staff can convince some kind of central use in behind that. I think backing trucks down that loading bay in a busy intersection, it's going to be murder for whoever wants to move in there. The train's going to be in, there's going to be cars backed up in both directions, and your semi is going to be holding up traffic, and you know, it's just like the adjoining property. You know, it's landlocked, and it's going. The only way you're going to get into that adjoining property is on a busy street. There's no parking on the street for people to go into those stores, which is probably why the connection in the back is so important. And I don't know, it's got a lot of things that are unfortunate about it. So.
I have a question for you. If we approve the DP as is, but the proponent somehow negotiate something with the adjacent landowner in the meantime. Is there something we can say that says they don't have to come back for another DP if they move their loading base to the back, for example? Like, we'd be allowing this as is, but I think to make their development better, particularly if they have the spot next door too, it's probably in their best interest to put the loading bay at the south side. But I don't necessarily want them to be discouraged because then they'd have to come back for another process. Can we issue the DP with if they move it to the back, we leave it at staff's discretion to make sure it works? Can we do something like that?
What we could do is, well, we could have a motion to that effect, and all we would have to do the next time is come in here and ask to waive DP requirements. So it wouldn't hold up there would be no application, we would just ask to waive the DP requirements for the changes.
Yeah, because I don't think I want to necessarily say no to this, but if they come up and essentially make their project better, I don't want them to feel like they just want to enter that because they have to go through a bureaucratic process again. You get my drift?
Yes.
Does that make sense to?
Yeah, at least there's an opportunity for an improvement. And if the adjoining property owners at the back and at the side want to have discussion to look for, particularly the one beside it, because they're really going to have trouble getting in and out of there right on that intersection. Anyway, it's worth the hope.
So if we added on to this motion, and should the proponent be able to move the loading bays to the south access, that we would waive DP for that change?
I think that's possible. I mean, the council can waive a requirement for a DP. So I'm just wondering whether it should be part of this recommendation or should be a separate motion.
It could absolutely be separate. Yep.
The development that's going on the corner, is it encompassing the backside of this one as well? I mean, the one that's coming by, what's that, the excavation company?
That development, I don't believe we have an application yet.
But are they looking at filling the whole piece in behind this one?
I don't think it matters to the
Well,
decision in front of council.
Yeah,
Let's-
well, I just thought it'd be better if I knew the connection was possible.
I don't think it matters to the decision that you have to make right now. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Elliott opposes, motion carried. I would like some help maybe wording a motion to say that should the proponent at 39666 Government Road be able to move the loading bays to the south axis of their property, or even just away from Government Road, that a DP not be required to make that change. Can I say something like that?
Or that the council would waive a DP requirement.
In that circumstance. Okay. Is there a second? Second by Councillor Scott. That just gives a bit of a loophole to see if you can design this a little bit better without having to go through bureaucracy. Any discussion on that point?
Yeah, I think it's do your best. You've heard the discussion here, you have the same thing at the APP, and we all had a dream for that area, and so that's...
And I think Councillor Cry is right. It's close enough to the railway crossing that road can back up dramatically and could impede loading trucks from coming in there, period, let alone other stuff. So I think it's something you really need to consider. We want to just make sure you have that loophole to be able to do that. Loophole might not be the right word. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Elliott opposes. Motion carries. Thank you, everybody. Moving on, first three readings of the District of Squamish Housing Agreement Bylaw. This is the housing agreement that goes with the project that we just considered. You want to give a quick outline? Very quick.
Okay. Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Jessie Fletcher. Oh, there it is. Planner with Community Planning, presenting to you today Housing Agreement Bylaw number 2593-2018, a bylaw authorizing the district to enter into a housing agreement. The housing agreement is for the property located at 39666 Government Road. Development permit 473 was presented to
You don't
council.
have to do that stuff, just
Okay.
talk about the meat and potatoes of the housing agreement.
Housing agreements allow local governments to deal with matters of occupancy beyond the scope of the zoning bylaw, but they must be entered into by bylaw. Any changes to a housing agreement, including discharge, can only be done through an amending bylaw, and notice of the housing agreement is registered on title. This housing agreement that is proposed secures 40 residential units. That's all the residential units in the building as purpose-built rental in perpetuity, and it aligns with OCP policy supporting tenure options to encourage socioeconomic diversity. And staff recommend that the District of Squamish give the first three readings to the Housing Agreement Bylaw number 2593-2018.
So mover. Moved by Councillor Kent, seconded by Councillor Blackman-Wolf. May I like to discuss this? I call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Third reading, a consideration, oh, we already did that. Ding, ding. Adoption, District of Squamish zoning bylaw number 2200-2011, amendment bylaw setbacks, cash and parking, 2576-2017. The mover, I'll move that. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Kent. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. District of Squamish zoning bylaw 2200-2011, amendment bylaw employment space 2577-2017 be adopted. Moved by Councillor Elliott, seconded by Councillor Kent. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. District of Squamish zoning bylaw 2020-2011 amendment bylaw FAR on Cleveland, upper story setback on Cleveland and frontages on Cleveland, number 2578. Move adoption. Moved by Councillor Kent, seconded by Councillor Pryor. I call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Community Planning and Infrastructure 2018 Water Main Design and Construction Management Consulting Contract Award.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Filling in for Mr. Wickham tonight, Gary Buxton, General Manager here at the District. So tonight we're looking to have Council authorise the award of consulting services for water main design and construction management. So the ISL won the bid back in 2012 for this, and they've been working with us since that point in time. They have partial or complete designs for many of the projects that are part of our 2018 capital program, which you saw initially for the first time this afternoon. We're recommending the sole source of the design and construction management to ISL for two reasons. Is that A, they've got the almost complete designs, providing significant cost savings. And from a staffing point of view, we have some capital staff that need some time to get up to speed. ISL, we have a trusted relationship with them. We've worked with them for a number of years. They have the expertise and the knowledge to perform the work and can support our staff in getting the work programs up to speed and running for 2018. The amount for the tender would be paid out part of the $1.1 million annual water main replacement capital plan. In terms of sole sourcing, it requires council authorisation. That's the recommendation tonight. There are potential issues with the New West Trade Partnership Agreement, but since this is part of a capital project and it's less than $200,000, we don't think that's a significant issue tonight. So really, we're just looking. The recommendation is that the sole source consulting services contract be awarded to ISL. I can entertain council's questions.
I'll move it.
By Councillor Kitt, seconded by Councillor Elliott. If we had gone to a proper tender on this, would ISL likely get it anyway? Like, well, I don't understand why we sole source, I really don't. If they're gonna be the best proponent anyway, let's do our due diligence and sole source, and not sole source.
In all likelihood, they would because of the conditions stated. I mean, they've literally got started on some of the work. So for a new engineer to roll in and pick up that work and start again, they'd essentially be spending some time just redoing that work or getting up to speed. So, I mean, perhaps the issue is whether or not we need to sort of late this year tender this sort of work at a much earlier stage.
Well, we absolutely should be, and that's my concern, is that we didn't, and now we're sole sourcing. And even if we anticipate, because of past experience and groundwork, just from a policy point of view, I prefer we did sole source. That's nothing against ISL. I think they're outstanding. Ms. Landay?
No, sorry, I was recovering.
I'm willing to support what's on the floor for us tonight, but I agree with the mayor. As a matter of principle, we really shouldn't do this, and we need to find a way to get these RFPs done in time for the building season.
Council just doesn't like to be put in a position where we don't have a choice because of a timeline, when we could have very easily had this in front of us 2 months ago with the proper tender.
I think the issue is that not so much the timing on this one, is that ISL have actually performed a lot of work late last year. So I think it's a matter of third quarter this year getting the RFP for design services out before we have a consultant engaged in the pre-design services. So it's not really a timing issue right now. They got to the work last year, so what we should have done is re-tendered those services Q2, Q3 last year. Because it's sort of, we're sort of well into the design process, so let's tender before we get into that for next year's projects.
That's right.
Yes, basically. I don't want us to get into bad habits. Just because it's happening this way this year doesn't mean it needs to happen like this every year. We should always be tendering and keeping our contractors hungry. Yes, they've done it for years, but that doesn't mean that someone more competitive with newer technology, with a different way of doing things, doesn't come along and outbid them. And so I think that we do have to be mindful of those timelines and be ready to do that, so that council's always making a decision on a tender award.
Understood. I will communicate that clearly.
I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Your hands are opposed. Motion carries. There is action. There are letters, correspondence for information. There are a number of them looking for letters to be pulled. Councillor Elliott?
I want to pull number 6.
Number 8.
LMLGA?
Yep. LGMA.
Number
Oh,
8.
LGMA. Anything else, Councillor Elliott? I'll come to you, Councillor Pryor.
Nope, that's the only one.
Councillor Pryor?
Yeah, number 8.
Regional Growth Strategy Bylaw? Correct?
Yes.
Oh, maybe I do have one more.
What's that?
I do have one more.
Which one?
15.
Employer health tax?
Yeah.
And I'd like to speak to 3 and 7. So you said number 8? Okay. No, I'm at 3 and 12, sorry. To read those Roman numerals. Okay, so just quickly, on the cannabis revenue sharing, we discussed this quite a bit at the BC Mayor's Caucus last week. And UBCM has discussed this, obviously, and I think everyone agrees there should be some revenue sharing. But exactly what and how much that is, I think, is really going to be determined after about a year of this rolling out. One of the things that the federal and provincial governments are saying is likely there's hardly any revenue in that first year because there's going to be so much regulation and laws and implementation that essentially will eat up most of the revenue from the taxes, the excise taxes. But come year 2, there'll likely be a realization of excise tax. So at that point, I think local governments really need to get their heads around what is a fair share of that excise tax, and collectively, right now it's just random municipalities throwing out a third, all of it, 50%. It's a little all over the place, but I just wanted to sort of bring that to council's attention. Next up is 6. That you, Councilor?
Oh, wait.
Did you have one?
I was just going to make a funny comment about that.
Okay.
I was going to say that we should know what
Don't get the weeds.
I think we should get our share of the Squamish sales. I'm just saying we probably have higher per capita sales.
I'll talk a little bit later when I sort of debrief everyone on the DC Mayor's caucus, but yeah. You could go all sorts of places.
Stop.
6, Councilor Elliott.
Thank you. So I'm pulling the letter from the LGMA about the responsible conduct, which I've been working on since UBCM passed a motion. And I wanted to refer this letter to staff because I think there's an opportunity to take these foundational principles of responsible conduct, which they've developed, and look at ways to integrate them into our candidate orientation for the election, our code of conduct, and the swearing-in ceremony. And so I would like to pass a motion to refer this letter to staff to see how we can start to implement these foundational principles before the full code of conduct is released.
Move to refer to staff. Moved by Councilor Elliott, second by Councilor Chappelle. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Number 7, Councilor Clark.
I just would ask you maybe to explain on the change to the land use plan for the SLRD. Did the concerns of the people in the public open house at the hotel, did they get addressed, their concerns a bit, you think?
Yes, I think they did. So I think there's some confusion out there about exactly what the SLRD is doing. So let me just maybe backtrack a little bit. The SLRD adopted the regional growth strategy 5-6 years ago. It's going through its first amendment process as prescribed by the legislation. And so a whole bunch of different amendments were outlined by the board. It was a brand new document 5 years ago, so it hadn't been ground truth or tested or anything. So it had set out a bunch of things that it wanted to consider amending. We got letters from Garibaldi at Squamish and the Squamish Nation asking that one of the pieces that we were considering be a major amendment process. And so that one piece was taken out and done. It's sort of like how we have sort of individual OCP processes, even though we're doing a big OCP amendment. So the RGS piece on Garibaldi Squamish was pulled out. There was a process around that, but they're still in the middle of an RGS amendment process. And so there was discussion at the board after the public hearing for the one piece of the amendment about the language that was in there wasn't meeting its intention. So how do we replace it with language that is more well thought out than the original language about resorts? So there's still debate and discussion at the regional district board about how that may be articulated, and we're still in the middle of the RGS amendment process. We're like, that was just one piece of it, so that's still ongoing.
That's ongoing. Okay, thank you.
And that's what this letter is articulating. So.
Yeah, I just didn't. I mean, I understood it basically,
yeah.
and I didn't understand the terminology.
Yeah. So we haven't actually amended the RGS yet. This was just one little piece
so
that was pulled out and done through a major amendment process.
But there was a lot of discussion, in Squamish about that, and there was many concerns at that open house.
It was a public hearing.
At the public hearing. Yeah. So will there be any more opportunity for our citizens to discuss what comes up?
Citizens can input into, just like they input into the OCP through letters, so there's all sorts of opportunity to.
But the SLRD board is still debating this subject, So will there be,
The SLRB board has voted to take the existing resort language out,
okay,
but the conversation about what do we replace it, or how do we replace it, or if we replace it is still ongoing. And so there's all sorts of opportunity for members of the entire region to comment on that,
but
not
there
just
will be
Squamish.
but there'll be an opportunity, not just by letter, will there be an opportunity?
I actually don't remember what the public engagement is yet, but there is still public engagement ongoing. So I just wanted to just acknowledge, made me move my page. I just wanted to acknowledge the winners of this Horatio Alger Association of Canada Awards. We two local kids received a fairly significant scholarship. So we had, I'm just looking for the names now. We have Sebastian Habel from Sea to Sky Learning Connections and Jada King Drake, who both from House and Secondary School, who, because they're outstanding students, outstanding people, have overcome struggles. They've gotten a very significant scholarship. I thought it was really interesting to see who else has won this scholarship. And it was like Jimmy Pattison and Wayne Gretzky, and like there's some, they got some big shoes to fill. But congratulations to them. That's pretty cool. I'm sure they're excited. And then we have the employer health tax.
Yeah, I just want to pull this letter. I think this is coming through our CFO to a committee meeting for discussion. And I was just wondering when that's happening, because this does have an impact on local government budgets.
It does. And why don't we just refer this letter to? And I suspect Christine's madly been doing the math on how this may affect our bottom line in years to come. So why don't we refer this to Finance and Audit Committee meeting, and then we can discuss it in whole there. Is that all right, Councilor?
Yeah, is that March or April?
It's actually already on the agenda for March 27th. We'll have a very quick verbal update of what we know so far.
Thank you. And move referral to the March 27th Finance and Audit Committee. Councilor Elliott, second by Councilor Chappell. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Looking for approval of the minutes of special business meeting of March 6th, regular business meeting March 6th, special business meeting March 12th, committee of the whole March 13th, special business meeting March 6th. Did I do that already?
Did we receive the rest of the letters?
Oh, I'll come back to that. It's a double, I've said that twice. Move approval, moved by Councilor Elliott, second by Councilor Kent. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Move receipt of all the letters. Moved by Councilor Kent, second by Councilor Elliott. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. There's recommended motion from the March 13th committee of the whole. The council authorized the mayor to sign a letter of support for the University of British Columbia Clean Energy Research Centre proposal for the National Resource Canada Electric Vehicles Infrastructure Demonstration Project. Moved by Councilor Chappell, second by Councilor Kent. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. There's minutes for receipt from the Smoke Bus Park Committee. Moved by Councilor Chappell, second by Councilor Pryor. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. There's a recommended motion that a kiosk map be provided by the District of Squamish once the Smoke Bus Trails is surveyed and the information is provided to staff. And can I do these both at once? And the District of Squamish install a urine diversion composting toilet, just like saying here, in the main Smoke Bus parking lot.
That was weird.
Wow. Moved by Councilor Kent, second by Councilor Chappell. All those in favor? It's late. Opposed? Motion carried. Community Development Standing Committee, that the minutes from March 6th be received for information. Moved by Councilor Black-and-Wolf, seconded by Councilor Elliott. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. And the recommended motions are that District of Squamish direct staff to support the development of car share in downtown Squamish, including assigning 3 parking spaces exclusively to car share vehicles, and that the District of Squamish becomes a business member in the car share once it is established and uses car share as an additional transportation option for staff. And that the District of Squamish directs staff to establish a process for parking variances and enable developer contributions to new car share vehicles and memberships, and that staff explore the possibility of a preferred provider and other partnership opportunities. Moved by Councilor Black-and-Wolf, second by Councilor Elliott. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. I'm losing my voice. Public Arts Select Committee, move minutes for receipt. For information, moved by Councillor Blackman-Wolf, I'll second that. All those in favor? Opposed, motion carries. We have no in-camera announcements. There is no one left in the audience, and there was no unscheduled public events. Open question periods, nope. And there is councillor staff announcement. There is a report for information, part of the package on WildSafe BC annual report. And there is a recommended motion that corresponds to that memo. Any questions about the memo? I think it was well done, for sure, as always. Would someone like to move the 4 motions that we received from the report? That we support the continuation of the Wild Safety C program, that we accept the 2018 Bear Conflict Management Plan, and that direct staff to implement the 2018 Bear Conflict Management Plan recommendations. Moved by Councillor Blackman-Wolf, seconded by Councillor Kent. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. I have a few things. So you should keep my piece of paper, Charlie. Oh, there. I just want to big kudos to Kate and her team for the Smart Cities Symposium. Really good turnout, really interesting collaborators who I think even beyond if you make an application at Smart Cities are really keen to do business, collaborate with the district and others in the community. I thought it was really well attended. I know Councillor Chappelle was there. Who else was there? There was one other councillor, maybe it's just Councillor Chappelle.
Well, Councillor Elliott took part in the panel.
Oh yeah, that's right, Councillor Elliott was there too. Councillor Elliott was there as well. So yeah, no, I thought it was excellent, and I know Kate's coming back to council with sort of the outcomes of that symposium and recommendations for council to consider sometime in early April. Mm-hmm. Any other thoughts on that, Councillor Elliott or Councillor Spell? Very quickly, I want to wish Tor Crossley an happy 85th birthday. It was like 130 or so people at the Art Gallery Sunday night wishing him a happy birthday. It was great. And hosted the BC Mayor's Caucus. It was actually, it stressed me out completely leading up to this because it's a lot of work. But Terry was fantastic, but really we had hired Shannon Lorenz to put all the logistics together. She's brilliant. I must say, everyone at the caucus, there's about 50 mayors from around the province and a couple from UBCM. The president, Wendy, was there, as well as Gary Isaac. Yeah. And by all accounts, everyone was really, really happy with all aspects, so I was really pleased. But I think Squamish really shone. I mean, it was beautiful weather. Every place that we had a reception or dinner or the facility, we had it up at Quest. And the tour, everyone just, it was just stellar, every piece of it, really good job. The 3 main topics we talked about were the opioid crisis, and the mayors, we had a great speaker, Dr. Mark Tyndall, who's the executive director of the BC Center for Disease Control, and he was, most of the mayors after said they learned more in that one session that they knew about the opioid crisis, period. And I think there was an appetite for the mayors to be bold and sort of, you read it in my column in the paper, but really take a completely different approach to policy on the opioid crisis. And really, there was a bit of a push to call for decriminalization, a bunch of other things. I think the mayors were a little hesitant to jump to that and need to do a little more homework and sort of find maybe a little more political conviction there. But there was, I thought it was quite amazing that the conversation was actually sort of trending in that direction. We had Carrie Jang and Lisa Anderson. They're the joint chairs of the Cannabis Regulation Committee, of the Joint Committee of Cannabis. The funny thing is that she was joking that when they set up the committee, no one actually saw the fact it was the Joint Committee on Cannabis Regulations. But so Lisa's with the province. She's heading up the province from a bureaucratic point of view. Carrie is with UBCM, of course, the councillor in the City of Vancouver. And they talked about what communities need to do to get ready for the rollout of legalization of cannabis, when things are going to be rolling out and when what's not. So, for example, the raw product will be legalized probably in August when the feds sort of finally pass the law. But edibles and tinctures and lotions and that type of thing will probably take about a year to regulate. I think there's quite a bit of discussion about whether or not the whole medical side of it confuses things, and that if it's legalized, that just take the medical side out of the equation because you can get it and don't have to get a prescription to get it. So I think, so there's still lots of pieces to this. Don Lidstone was there talking about the actual bylaws and what municipalities have to do to get ready for this. And of course, we've already got a bylaw that sort of governs where we say yes and no to this, but municipalities that have nothing are probably going to be in a pretty tough situation. So they're encouraged, even if it's just to say, no, we don't want any, to have something in there, because retroactively trying to figure out where and how you want this to roll out in your community, you need to get ahead of the 8 ball there. What else on that one? One thing that Don Lidstone said was he actually has one seriously and potentially 3 other municipalities that are actually looking at getting into the business and deriving revenue from a corporation that would actually sell marijuana. Just thought about that. And then the other topic we explored was the rural-urban divide. I had about 5 different mayors, actually 4 mayors, Gregor Robertson and Lori Ackerman from the north, Wendy Booth from the Kootenays, who's an electoral director, Del Masato from North Van, and a student from Quest whose keystone question is about how small towns in Northern Ontario are actually dying and why, and sort of some of the challenges there. And then a professor from University of Fraser Valley, Hamish Telford, who did a bigger conversation about the rural-urban divide. And it's kind of one of those elephants in the room at UBCM all the time. There's sort of this tension between the rural and the urban and the north and the south. And so it was nice to actually sort of get the conversation out on the table and have Lori and Gregor sort of try to empathize with each other and understand each other's perspectives. And so that was kind of cool. Anyway, I'm glad it's over. Because it was a little stressful, but it's all good. Anybody else? Any announcements to make? Oh, I should mention one thing. The BC Mayor's Caucus did make one motion that we support, and I can read them out to you. Some principles around that we want to make sure, they're very basic principles. I'll just quickly read them out. That cannabis legalization should not result in additional local government funding by property taxpayers. Local government should be reimbursed for costs associated with the implementation of legalized cannabis. Local government should be reimbursed for any additional policing costs resulting from cannabis legalization, and remaining excise tax revenue after taking out expenses incurred as part of the principles 1 to 3, and federal share should be shared between the province of BC and local governments. Just some basic, as opposed to saying we want 33% and we want, and these are principles that UBC has been working on, and so the BC Mayor's Caucus supported those principles. Yeah.
Is that a motion you want to move?
We could move that too.
I'd like to move that motion.
Sure.
I think that's excellent.
Moved by Councillor Chappelle that the District of Squamish also support the UBCM principles as laid out. I'll send you that. I'll second that. Any?
I like Jason's idea of collecting local revenue, of making it a percentage of your local sales.
We'll explore that
actually
further.
a sensible, that seems like a sensible and fair income.
I think, yeah, okay, that's another conversation, but I like it. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Anything coming up? Anything coming up? No? Anybody else? Yeah.
We'll talk about, so we had 3 marine biologists, the marine event, which went fantastically well. We had originally advertised it as an adult event, but every parent brought a child, so it was really fascinating. David Schiffman came up, Francis Robertson from the United States, and Edward Gregor, and they all spoke about the marine environment, and just how how interconnected everything is. And I learned a whole lot about sharks, which was, I never knew about trucks being able to drive into shark mouths. And what was most impressive was the kids' questions. And we have a bunch of smart cookies in our town that challenge the researchers, that they have to get back to them on things like, what about this bacteria that eats the shark's eyes? And I was super impressed with the knowledge, and all the researchers wanted to come back up to town because of the kids' interactions. So I think it's a testament to the parents that bring their kids to sciencey events. So I really enjoyed that. It's great.
Awesome. All right, I'll look for motion to terminate. Moved by Councilor Price, seconded by Councilor Elliott. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thanks, everybody.